Chapter 734. Qin Shuchuan's thinking was simple. As long as the goods were sent out of the sea and handed over to the people arranged by Yang Taizhu overseas, there would be no evidence. At that time he could just say that he didn't know anything. Without evidence, no one could casually convict him. No matter what, Qin Shuquan was still the head of the Security Bureau's office in Crimson City. His words were still very authoritative. Hearing this, platoon leader Lung Feng hesitated. After all, offending the head of the Security Bureau was not a wise move. If he really wanted to target him, how could he, a small platoon leader, resist? Platoon leader Lung Feng was still in a mental struggle, hesitating about what to do. On the new pier, another group of people had appeared. The leader was a young man with delicate features. The moment he appeared, he laughed heartily. "Brother Qin, you have such great authority. Lung Feng doesn't belong to our Security Bureau, yet you can order him around as you please. You're really amazing." "Who is it? Who is secretly making sarcastic remarks? Come out if you have the ability." As soon as the sarcastic remarks were heard, Qin Shuchuan's face darkened. He suddenly turned his head, looking like he was looking for someone to punish. Qin Shuquan did indeed have such confidence. Director Yang San was not in Crimson City, so he was the highest-ranking person in charge of the Security Bureau here. From a certain point of view, he could exist side by side with military chiefs like Lung Song and Gao Xiong. Even if the people from the political department came, he could still wrestle with them. Due to the confidentiality rules, the Security Bureau was independent of any system and was directly under the 6th Young Master's jurisdiction. In other words, even if Yang Wuyi appeared here, if he was unyielding, he could still face him head-on. Of course, all of this was limited to the other party not receiving the 6th Young Master's orders. Thinking about how he dared to face Yang Wuyi, what a proud existence he was. It was no wonder that when he heard people talking about him like this, he immediately shouted like a plucked rooster. "Ah, Brother Qin, I haven't been hiding in the dark. I've been standing here all this time. It's just that your standards are too high and you didn't notice me." As the laughter continued, Che Chao led a group of 20 members of the Security Bureau's operations team that had been transferred from various places to Qin Shuquan. A group of people strode over. Because it was dark, they couldn't see clearly, but Qin Shuchuan's expression had already begun to change. Since the other party was so fearless, his identity must not be simple. Moreover, the goods were right in front of him. How was he going to explain himself under such conclusive evidence? Qin Shuchuan's brain spun rapidly as he formulated various countermeasures in his mind. At this time, Che Chao had already strode in front of him. With the help of the street lights on the pier, they could finally see each other clearly. At this moment, Qin Shuchuan's face was filled with shock. "Che Chao, how could it be you? Why can't it be me?" Che Chao, who was far calmer than Qin Shuquan, had a smile on his face as he slowly asked, "Brother Qin, why are you so nervous? Could it be that my appearance has delayed your good fortune?" When he suddenly saw Che Chao, Qin Shuquan was indeed shocked. He could not understand why the other party would appear in Crimson City, and why he did not receive any news at all. However, he soon calmed down. After all, the other party's level was lower than his. Even so, what was there to be afraid of? Perhaps the other party had come to Crimson City to settle some personal matters, or perhaps to visit family and friends. At this point, it must be said that the majority of the staff of the Security Bureau lived in the dark, and the mental pressure was immense. Therefore, every year they would have a normal holiday to return to society and be an ordinary person. Otherwise they would be driven crazy. Qin Shuquan thought that Che Chao was probably on vacation, and he just happened to appear in Crimson City, which was why the scene was happening in front of him. It could be said that he was comforting himself, but in short, Qin Shuquan quickly calmed down and strode towards Che Chao. As he walked, he said, "Brother Che, it's not that I want to nag you, but since you've come to Crimson City, you should at least greet me so that I can do my part as a host, right?" Qin Shuquan took the initiative to get close to Che Chao, and Che Chao also smiled and replied, "Hey, I know that Brother Qin is busy, so I didn't come to disturb you. Please don't blame me." Che Chao being so polite made Qin Shuquan feel more at ease, and the smile on his face grew wider. "What do you mean by disturb? You don't treat me as one of your own. Just based on this point you should be punished. How about this, I'll punish you with 3 cups of wine tonight. Haha, let's go, I'll find a place to welcome you." As he spoke, Qin Shuchuan's large hand had already landed on Che Chao's shoulder. Those who didn't know would think that their relationship was very good. Che Chao, who was originally cupping his fists and apologizing, was waiting for Qin Shuchuan's hand to land on his shoulder. The smile on his face suddenly disappeared, and was replaced by a cold expression. His large hand suddenly grabbed Qin Shuquan's arm from his chest, and then with a twist, he pulled Qin Shuquan into his embrace, and a Type 54 firearm was pressed against Qin Shuquan's temple. "I'm sorry, Director Qin, I have important matters to attend to, so I don't have the time to drink with you." The sudden change in the situation made Qin Shuquan's subordinates, who were watching everything with a smile, stunned. Then, under the conditioned reflex of their years of training, a few of them reached into their waists, pulled out the knives on their waist and shouted, "What are you doing? Release Director Qin immediately. Don't be agitated, let's observe the situation first." Dong Hui, who was mixed in the crowd, played a role at this time. He stretched out his arms, stopping everyone from being impulsive, and gave a few of his subordinates a look. Under Dong Hui's lead, a few of his subordinates also joined the ranks of persuading everyone not to be impulsive, causing the originally tense atmosphere to be suppressed. At this time, Qin Shuquan was in Che Chao's embrace, facing his subordinates. Seeing Dong Hui's performance, his eyes seemed to be about to pop out. But at this time he also knew that this was not the time to fight with Dong Hui. His opponent was still Che Chao. "Oh brother Che, what are you doing? Do you know that everything you're doing is offending your superiors? Do you know, according to our internal family law, if you do this, not only will you die, your family won't get any benefits? Let me tell you, let me go immediately, and for the sake of our previous relationship I can pretend that nothing happened." Qin Shuquan was still suppressing people with his power, trying to make Che Chao stop. But now that he had the initiative, how could Che Chao easily let go? He looked at the back of Qin Shuquan's head with a smile, as if he was looking at an idiot. "Director Qin, things have already turned out like this, don't you know how to repent? Tell me, where are these things going to be shipped?" "Of course it's to the Security Bureau." Qin Shuquan gritted his teeth and said. "Security Bureau? Why don't I know about it?" Che Chao asked again. "Your rank is not high enough, of course you don't know. Let me tell you, this is the director's arrangement, and it's classified as a top secret. It's already a mistake for you to know this now, do you understand?" Relying on his higher rank, Qin Shuquan spouted nonsense. Now, as long as he could get through this, he would find a random crime to take down Che Chao. In short, he would not give Che Chao a chance to ask Yang San, he wanted to silence him. Qin Shuquan was still thinking about what to do once he had the initiative, when a very familiar voice came from behind him. "I don't understand? I've never given such an order, but I don't know who you heard it from." "Of course you don't understand, this is the Bureau?" Qin Shuquan was about to say something with an arrogant look, but suddenly he was stunned. This voice was so familiar it sounded like the Bureau. Directors. Che Chao seemed to know what he was thinking, he loosened his grip slightly, allowing him to turn his head. When he turned his head, he saw Yang San in front of him with a fierce face. Immediately, Qin Shuquan's legs turned to jelly, and he could no longer stand. With a plop he sat on the ground. The main culprit had appeared, and Qin Shuquan knew that everything was over. The irrefutable evidence was right in front of him. He was afraid that no matter what excuse he found, it would be useless. When he thought of the director's means and the family law of the Security Bureau, it was really difficult for him to die even if he wanted to. His face turned pale at this moment. "Bureau? Director, I was wrong. Yang Taiju forced me to do everything, I was too greedy." Yang San didn't say another word, so Qin Shuquan confessed everything. Now he no longer hoped for a future or even to live, he only hoped for a quick death and not to implicate his family. He was very grateful. Qin Shuquan was so cooperative, and Yang San stood there and listened coldly. After listening to Qin Shuquan, he sighed softly. "Qin Shuquan, you've been in the Security Bureau for a long time, and your name is on the 6th Young Master's list. Do you know that your future is limitless? Do you know how many generations your descendants will be proud of having you as their ancestor? But now, because of your wrong decision, everything is gone." Yang San could not say whether he was lamenting or feeling pity for Qin Shuquan. He shook his head several times. It was obvious that this result made him a little sad. After all, it was not easy to cultivate a talent, and they had known each other for so many years, it was impossible to say that they had no feelings for each other. Now that he had made a mistake, a big mistake, it also meant the end of their friendship. It was no wonder that Yang San was a little sad. "Yes, I know that I have done something wrong this time. I am willing to confess everything and I am willing to testify. I only hope that the director will not implicate my family and give me a quick death." Qin Shuquan could feel the sadness in Yang San's heart. How could he feel good in his heart? But since he had embarked on this path, there was no turning back. At this time he could only use the last trace of the director's feelings for him to make his own request. Chapter 735. Cooperate well, I promise I won't implicate your family. Yang San knew what Qin Shuquan was worried about. Perhaps this was the only thing he could do for the other party. He patted the other party's shoulder lightly. Che Chao, I'll leave this to you. He will cooperate well with you and tell you everything we want to know. Director, don't worry, I'll get the confession immediately. Che Chao patted his chest and promised. There was a glimmer of excitement in his eyes. The chance to make a big contribution had come. As long as he did this well, he could get promoted as he wished and become the new director of the Crimson City Security Bureau. One was eager to make a contribution, the other was eager to atone for his sins. The two of them got together, and the process of taking notes and testimonies went very smoothly. In just half an hour, a clear file appeared in front of Yang San, who was in the duty room. After taking a quick look, Yang San sighed softly. Send someone to inform Yang Wu in the palace. It's time to reel in the net. Also, get the action team to move out. All the officials related to this matter must not be let off. Arrest them all. Yes, I'll do it immediately. Che Chao replied and turned to leave. This night, Crimson City was destined to not be peaceful. Palace. This palace occupied a large area and was built magnificently. It seemed to be an independent existence from Crimson City. Although the master was rarely here, no one dared to disrespect this place. So much so that anyone who walked out of this place could issue orders, and they all had a higher status than anyone else. Lin Lin, this woman with average looks and beauty was at most 30%, was one of the people who often went in and out of the palace. With her eloquence that could make a dead person come back to life, she gained the trust of the fifth Madame Su Maner and became the representative of the fifth Madame. Originally, Su Maner had a personal maid named Xiao Yun. However, this maid was a little lazy. In the end, the purchasing of the necessities of the palace fell to Lin Lin, who had been by Su Maner's side since she came to Crimson City. Lin Lin was a person who knew how to conduct herself. Not only did she know how to say nice things to make Su Maner laugh heartily, she also had a very good relationship with the other maids. In this regard, her husband, Yang Taizhu, was also very willing to spend money. With money, she could naturally bribe many people to do things for her. It was precisely because Lin Lin usually paid attention to the people around her that she was able to rope in more people. When the Yang mansion was surrounded, Yang Shan arranged for his trusted steward to leave through the secret passage in the mansion and come to the palace. Soon, a servant girl who had received favor handed the news to Lin Lin. Lin Lin, who suddenly received the news, was shocked. Although she didn't know what her husband, Yang Taizhu, did for a living, seeing how generous he usually was, she could guess that the money might not be so honorable. Because of this matter, she had hesitated and considered. However, when she thought of how his father was the dignified Minister of Foreign Affairs and was the person favored by the sixth young master, it was reasonable for such a family to have some unexpected wealth. She didn't think too much about it. However, now it seemed that the matter was a little serious. Once something happened to her husband, she would have no backing and no income. How could she unite more maids in the future? This would shake her foundation. She had no choice but to save him. Lin Lin decided to take action. However, before leaving the palace, she still had a very important thing to do. That was to first obtain the support of the fifth madam. Only in this way could she be considered to have the sword of the imperial court. Only then could she do things without fear. Is madam asleep? Lin Lin came to the room where Su Maner was resting and asked the maid on duty tonight. Not yet. Sister Lin, is something the matter? The maid on duty had a good relationship with Lin Lin and asked with a smile. I have a small matter to see madam. On the surface, Lin Lin acted as if nothing had happened. As she spoke, she had already walked into the bedroom. When she saw Su Maner sitting in front of the god's mirror removing her makeup, she knelt on the ground without another word. It was just an action without a word, but it gave Xiao Yun a fright. Su Maner, who was sitting there, also saw everything that happened behind her through the divine mirror. She was also shocked. Ling, what happened? Why do you have to be so respectful? It was just like how Yang Qindong asked his subordinates not to kneel for no reason. In the palace, unless it was an important occasion, there was no rule to kneel. Madam, please save Ling, save the life of my husband's family. With a tear-stained face, Lin Lin looked like an excellent actress at this moment. She spoke as if she had been wronged. What's going on? Stand up and talk. Su Maner's expression became much more serious when she heard this. This maid who was very considerate of her was married to the son of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yang Shan. What exactly happened that even Minister Yang was unable to save her? Su Maner, who had already thought of the wording, started to distort the truth. She said that Minister Yang had long made people jealous because of his high position and power. She said that the Yang family had a relationship with Madame again, causing some people to be jealous. She said that it was not a matter of a day for everyone to overthrow Minister Yang and so on. In the end, Lin Lin said bluntly, "Madam, the downfall of my husband's family is a small matter, but it will affect Madam's reputation. What's more, there will be people who want to take the opportunity to attack the sixth young master's prestige. This is a big matter. The sixth young master is not in the city all year round, and the development of the city is so prosperous. It's hard to tell what's in a person's heart." Su Maner did not pay much attention to the previous words. Even if it involved herself, she did not pay much attention to it. It was enough for her husband to know what kind of person she was. As for the opinions of others, she did not care at all. Because without her husband, she was probably a dead person now. It was hateful that she believed the one-sided words of a villain and even had delusions of killing her husband. Now that she thought about it, she really regretted it. All of this made Su Maner extremely grateful to Yang Qindong. She would not allow anyone to threaten her husband's safety, even if her reputation was damaged. Now that she heard that someone actually had such an idea, how could she not be angry? She glared and said, "How preposterous. Is it true that because my husband is not around, some people want to indulge in wild fantasies?" "Yes, madam. This matter is not a small matter. Please make a decision." Seeing that Su Maner had fallen into a trap, Lin Lin was overjoyed and continued to instigate her. Lin Lin was asking what to do next. Should she help the Yang family? In this way it would be equivalent to indirectly helping her. Su Maner understood the hidden meaning in his words. After thinking for a while, she said, "Then go and take a look. If they are trying to frame you, then let them investigate seriously. If they really did do it, then even you are not allowed to speak carelessly." Su Maner was still smart. She did not make a conclusion about things that she did not understand. Instead, she wanted to base it on facts. However, how could she know that the starting point of any matter might be good, but in the end, it depended on who was carrying it out. If the person carrying it out was someone who could not distinguish right from wrong, wanting to have a fair decision would become a delusion. Lin Lin was waiting for this sentence. She immediately agreed, stood up, and walked out of the bedroom. At this moment she was no longer acting like a weak woman just now. Instead, she was filled with pride and confidence. "Since you dare to go against my husband's family, then you can wait to be dealt with." After receiving Su Maner's support, Lin Lin seemed to have changed into a different person. When she walked out of the palace, her expression was filled with confidence. She wanted to use the name of a tiger. What could others do about it? Leading 4 maids, Lin Lin walked in front with large strides. Her arrogant appearance made her look like a master. Along the way, all the maids who met her stopped in their tracks from afar. When they got closer, they lowered their heads and asked questions with a fawning and respectful expression. From afar, she could see the outer gate of the palace. As long as she walked past it, she would reach the outer palace. Although there were many guards there in charge of security with Lin Lin's status, they did not even have the courage to check. It could be said that once she passed through the gate, she would be free to fly. Lin Lin's face subconsciously revealed a victorious smile. However, at this moment, a light shout sounded behind her. "Are you Lin Lin? Wait a moment." Someone suddenly shouted her name behind her. Out of instinct, Lin Lin stopped in her tracks. When she turned around, she saw a group of people coming from afar. She recognized the leader. It was First Madame's personal maid, Xiao Qing. Beside Xiao Qing was the palace's head maid, Tai Die. Sister Xiao Qing. After seeing that it was the young miss, Lin Lin immediately put away her arrogant expression and showed a very well-behaved appearance. She even intentionally bowed. This was the etiquette that only a servant would show to a master. It was no wonder that Lin Lin was so careful. Although she was valued by the 5th Madame and was considered a superior existence among the maids, she was still nothing in front of Xiao Qing. She was First Madame's favorite and had grown up with First Madame. Putting aside the fact that their relationship had been nurtured since they were young, Xiao Qing's husband, Sun Chuang, was already a battalion officer. Even the 6th young master had taken note of him. It could be said that his future was bright. Normally, such a person could open her own residence and be a mistress. However, she didn't. Instead, she stayed by the eldest madame's side and served her wholeheartedly. Just based on this, which maid in the palace didn't respect her? Which maid dared to give her a hard time? The sudden appearance of little Qing forced Lin Lin to stop her footsteps and stand there with a respectful expression. Chapter 736. Little Qing took small steps and soon arrived in front of Lin Lin. She first looked her up and down and then asked with a smile, "Little sister Lin Lin, it's so late. Where are you going?" If someone else asked her this question, Lin Lin could choose not to answer. They were all maids. One served the first madam and the other served the fifth madam. They usually minded their own business. But since it was Little Qing who asked the question, Lin Lin had to answer. "It's like this. The fifth madam has something for me to do. So I left the palace late at night." "I see. Since it's like this, you don't have to go. Go back and wait for the news." Little Qing nodded and then said slowly, "Chem?" Lin Lin was also confused by this sentence. She looked up and said to Little Qing, "Sister Little Qing, I don't know if you didn't hear clearly. I went out this time on the fifth madam's orders." I know. That's why I told you to go back and wait." Little Qing didn't wait for her to finish and stopped her. Then she turned her head and looked at the 8 maids behind her, especially the leader, Taidier, and said, "Listen well. Send little sister Little Qing and the others back. Don't wander around outside." After saying this casually, Little Qing turned and left. She didn't even want to explain. The 8 maids behind her all stayed and stared at Lin Lin and the others. It seemed that if they didn't listen, then don't blame them for being rude. She was stopped. Even though it was Little Qing who gave this order, Lin Lin was still a bit unconvinced. Although she could go back and ask fifth madam again, it would inevitably delay time. Who knew if there would be any changes in the situation? So her eyes moved and she looked at the 8 maids surrounding her. She smiled and said, "Sisters, we're all maids and it's not easy for us. Why don't you make it easy? If you do me a favor, I will remember it in my heart." As she spoke, Lin Lin took out a stack of banknotes from her sleeves. The smallest banknote on the stack was worth 100 taels. She took out 800 taels. One had to say that Lin Lin was very generous. If it was any other time, the maids below would be beaming with joy and would say some words of blessings as they received the banknotes. However, it was a pity that this time, the trick that worked every single time did not work. The faces of the 8 maids didn't change at all. The leader, Taidier, acted as if she didn't see the banknotes and said, "Lin Lin, you'd better not make things difficult for us. Be obedient. Otherwise, once we start fighting, it will be really embarrassing." After getting the cold shoulder, Lin Lin's face became very ugly. She gritted her teeth and said, "Okay, then I'll go find the fifth madam. I don't believe that there's no justice in the palace." As she spoke, she turned around angrily and walked straight to the palace where the fifth madam was resting. At this time, Lin Lin didn't know that her backer, the fifth madam, had been invited to the first madam's palace. Not only Madame Wu but Madame Xue, the third madam, was also there. At this time they were reading a telegram sent by Yang Qindong, which talked about some things about Yang Taizhu. Su Monair had just left when she received a message saying that the first madam had invited her. In the days when Yang Qindong was not around, the master of the palace was naturally the first madam, Hu Yan. Now that the first madam had given the order, not to mention that she had not yet rested, even if she had rested, she still had to get dressed and get up. Su Monair didn't dare to delay. With the help of the maid, Xiao Yun, she put on some light makeup and rushed to the first madam's palace with a group of maids. As soon as she entered the hall, she saw that Hu Yan and Madame Xue had already taken their seats. "Fifth sister, you're here. Come and sit." Seeing Su Monair appear, Hu Yan's face didn't have the slightest hint of anger or condemnation because she already knew that Lin Lin's actions were carried out behind Su Monair's back. In fact, this sister of hers didn't know anything. Su Monair really didn't know anything. Since the first madam called her, she naturally sat down. Then she smiled and asked Hu Yan, "Sister, what happened?" Something must have happened for them to call her over so late at night. Su Monair's IQ wasn't low. She didn't think that the sisters would gather at this time just to chat about their daily lives. This time, before Hu Yan could speak, Madame Xue had already passed the telegram to her. "Fifth sister, you should take a look at this first." With a face full of doubt, Su Monair took the telegram from the maid, Xiao Yun. When her gaze fell on the contents of the telegram, Su Monair's expression quickly became a little ugly. Perhaps a telegram to others could be sent more simply, as long as the meaning was clear. But how could Yang Qindong be stingy with his words when sending a telegram to his wife? In this telegram, Yang Qindong explained everything very clearly. He even mentioned Lin Lin's name. Although some things couldn't be described in such detail like when they met, the mention of Lin Lin's name already explained a lot of things. While Su Monair was still digesting this news, Hu Yan had already opened her mouth and said, "This time my husband is really angry. He risked his life at the front lines to fight for the world, working hard to save more Han people. But we still have to worry about our rear. Speaking of which, it's really our fault. It was a simple sentence, but Su Maner's expression froze when she heard it. She knew that she had really done something wrong this time. She had actually mistakenly trusted a maidservant and unknowingly passed on such a wrong signal to others, which had almost led to a disaster. Thinking that if it wasn't for her bad judgment, she wouldn't have made her husband worry about this. Su Maner felt waves of self-blame. Just as Su Maner was still accepting the condemnation in her heart, Xiao Yun suddenly entered the hall. She first greeted them and bowed. Then she said, "Madam, third madam, fifth madam, Sun Chuang of the Imperial Army has something to discuss with you. Your husband is here. Let him in," Hu Yen said jokingly. From this point, it could be seen that she was not very angry. She, who had lived in the Hu family since she was young, was even more tired of hearing about all kinds of struggles. She had seen many servants doing bad things in the name of their master. It was precisely because of this that she didn't find it strange. Lin Lin was guilty, so she would be punished. As for fifth sister, after this incident she should be more careful when using people. This was equivalent to having an effect. Xiao Yun, who was teased by her master, blushed. After agreeing, she went out to pass on the message. Soon Sun Chuang, who had the rank of major, walked into the hall. He strode in, but once he entered the hall, he knelt on the ground without raising his head. He knew very well what kind of status the three people in front of him had. If he casually looked at them, it would be a sin. Sun Chuang of the Imperial Army greets first madam, third madam, and fifth madam. A loud and clear voice sounded in the hall. "Get up. What's the matter at this time of night?" Hu Yen sat at the head of the table and asked in the manner of a host. Reporting to first madam, news just came from the front. The matter of Yang Tieju's smuggling has been confirmed without a doubt. Not only that, his collaborator also said that there are a large number of weapons and armors in the Yang residence. This subordinate has come to temporarily close the palace gates in advance. Please allow me to do so. Sun Chuang's head was still lowered, but he did say a fact and result that the women did not expect. Are they going to rebel? When Hu Yen heard this, she was also shocked. It was common for subordinates to do some evil things in the name of their master, and it was also very difficult to truly prohibit it. However, the matter at hand involved military supplies, so the nature of the matter had changed. Among the three women, when Su Maner heard this, she was so scared that her face turned pale. Even the newspaper in her hand fell to the ground. At this moment she finally knew what kind of end she had gotten for her nepotism. And it was her husband who had sensed all of this. If her husband had not seen through everything, what kind of result would there be? Would there be a day when someone would threaten the safety of the palace? If her two sisters were really hurt because of this, wouldn't she be guilty of the most heinous crimes? At this moment, Su Maner hated Lin Lin to the core. She had trusted her so much, but she had indeed used her name to help the evildoer. Something big had almost happened. It was truly unforgivable. Third Madame's expression also changed abruptly. Then she looked at First Madame Hu Yen and said, "Sister, the matter isn't that serious, right? Isn't Yang Wu at Yang Shan's place? You shouldn't give them a chance to resist. Isn't it better to be on guard?" Hu Yen shook her head lightly. It was better to be safe than sorry. When she thought about how someone really threatened the safety of the palace, it was fine if something happened to her and the others, but she was afraid that it would cause her husband to go crazy. If that happened, many plans would be disrupted. This was the most terrible thing. Her husband was risking his life at the front. It was fine if they could not provide any help, but they definitely could not be a hindrance at the back. Thinking of this, Hu Yen said decisively, "All right, we'll do as Battalion Commander Sun says. Seal the palace for now. If there aren't enough troops, you can deploy troops nearby. In a while, I will ask Xiao Yun to give you the token that my husband gave me." Yes, Sun Chuang understands. Sun Chuang left with large strides. Holding the token that Hu Yen gave him, he mobilized a cold front battalion to protect the palace. And inside the palace, the three madams also returned to their own palaces. Su Maner also returned, but her expression was not good. Thinking about what she had said before the three sisters separated, she would definitely give them an explanation. On the way back, she clenched her right fist several times, loosened it and clenched it again. Chapter 737. Su Maner had been through a lot since she was young, and her willpower had long been tempered to be very firm. Otherwise, she would not have attempted to assassinate Yang Qindong. But recently, or rather, ever since she came to Crimson City, she was completely protected. Every day there were people serving her in the palace. Over time, her wildness had been worn away, and she had become much purer. She originally thought that her life would be like this. One day when she gave birth to a child for her husband, she would be happy for the rest of her life. But now it seemed that conflicts were everywhere. If she was careless, she might be consigned to eternal damnation. Fortunately, her husband was reasonable and understood people's hearts. Her sisters were also kind-hearted and did not have the intention to blame her. If it was someone else, this matter would probably be enough to put her to death, and she would never be able to make a comeback. Since her husband understood her so well, then not only did she have to clean up the beginning and end of this matter, she also had to do some other things. She was lazy from staying in the palace every day. It was time for her to stretch her muscles and bones. As she thought about it, she returned to her palace. From afar she saw Lin Lin, who had an aggrieved expression, walking over. "Madam, I wanted to leave the palace but I was stopped by Xiao Qing." "How is she stopping me? She is clearly not giving you face." "Xiao Yun, take her down and slap her 30 times. Without waiting for Lin Lin to finish speaking, Su Maner's voice sounded. At this time, this woman was still trying to sow discord in front of her. Her intentions were truly hateful. Xiao Yun, who was at the side, did not know what had happened. She only knew that Madame's expression was not good after she returned. Now that there was an order, she did not dare to disobey. She brought 2 maids to Lin Lin's side, and a series of loud slapping sounds rang out. Lin Lin was still thinking that this time she was ordered to leave the palace. This time, 5th Madame would definitely stand on her side. Who would have thought that there would be such an outcome? When the palm hit her face, she did not react. It was only after being slapped a few times that she became clear-headed and cried out that she had been wronged. At this time, Su Maner had already entered the inner chamber. Xiao Yun followed by the side with a face full of confusion and doubt. Su Maner trusted this maidservant who had followed her for many years. She didn't hide anything and told her the gist of the matter. Xiao Yun, who heard the truth, was also shocked. "There's actually such a thing? Doesn't that mean Lin Lin is also one of the accomplices? Then, what are we?" "Yes, what are we?" Su Maner repeated this sentence with a bitter smile on her face. Su Maner finally knew how much pressure this matter would bring her. Even if after this matter her husband did not blame her, what would those maids in the palace think? What would those high officials in Crimson City think? It seemed that she had to do something. "Xiao Yun, go and interrogate Lin Lin with Captain Tai later. I want to know what she did behind our backs." Su Maner bit her lips and said, "Yes, ma'am." Xiao Yun also knew the importance of this matter and hurriedly agreed. However, she still had some doubts as she asked, "What if Lin Lin doesn't say it? She has a lot of ideas. We can use any method. She won't keep it a secret. Oh right, doesn't she still have a father outside the palace who drinks every day? If she doesn't say it, then she will be harming her father." As Su Maner spoke, her eyes revealed a terrifying aura. People say that if you don't experience some things, you will never grow up and mature. And this time, Su Maner had obviously grown up a lot. Hearing that even her family was being threatened, Xiao Yun knew what to do. And with her father's threat, she was not afraid that Lin Lin would not say it. But what should she do after saying it? She had no choice but to ask, "How should we deal with Lin Lin?" "Kill her. As long as she cooperates, you can tell her that her father can still live out his remaining years in peace." She seemed to have used the last bit of her strength to say this. Su Maner waved her hand at Xiao Yun, meaning that she was tired and needed a good rest. Xiao Yun left. But she did not know that Su Maner, who was in the bedroom, was not sleeping. Instead, she was thinking of a very big plan. A department that would eventually be comparable to the Security Bureau became a prototype that night. After reporting it to Yang Qindong, it was given a new name, the Central Intelligence Agency. And the boss of this Central Intelligence Agency was Su Maner. Its appearance would greatly make up for some of the negligence of the Security Bureau. In the future, it would make countless military achievements. This was probably something that even Yang Qindong did not foresee. After Lin Lin was slapped 30 times, she, who had a mouthful of blood, was dragged to the woodshed at the side. There Xiao Yun set up a temporary torture chamber. Whether it was coercion or enticement, in the end she found out everything she wanted to know. The result was still very gratifying. Lin Lin was only after Yang Tieju's family background and money. She did not really participate in what he did. This made Su Maner, who knew everything after the fact, heave a sigh of relief. She was guilty, but her sin was not that big. She could finally face Yang Qindong and her sisters. Lin Lin was finished. The father and son of the Yang family, who were still unaware of all this, still placed their hopes on him. After waiting for a long time, no one came. Instead, a secret agent from the security bureau came to the Yang residence. He came to Yang Wu's ear and whispered something softly. Yang Wu was originally standing there calmly, but after hearing the whispered news, his entire person became unwell. His eyes widened as he looked at Yang Shan and the captured Yang Taiju. Suddenly he laughed out loud. Good, very good. I didn't expect that you were not only after money, but also have greater ambitions. Meant search. Turn the entire Yang residence upside down 3 times. Even a tile must be smashed into pieces. Absolutely not allow any item to remain intact. Yang Wu suddenly gave this ruthless order, and the Lung Feng soldiers who came with him agreed and began to move. Facing the ruthless Lung Feng warriors, Yang Shan wanted to stop them, but he realized that it was useless. He could not help but ask Yang Wu, Master Yang Wu, what is the meaning of this? What is the meaning of this? What is the meaning of this? Why are you asking me about the good things you did? Yang Wu's face was overflowing with anger. He had just received news from Bureau Chief Yang San. Qin Shuquan said that once when he was drunk, Yang Taiju boasted that he had prepared some weapons and armor in his residence. If things changed, they could cause havoc in Rayman City and even threaten the safety of the palace in order to protect themselves. Once the news came out, Yang Wu could no longer remain calm. If such a thing really happened, then he had let down the young master's trust. In that case, even if he died, he would not be able to thank the world. Facing such a person, how could he still be courteous at this moment? Yang Wu was angry, so the Lung Feng warriors also began to act. The huge Yang residence was quickly turned over and many things were found. There were more than 4 million taels of gold and silver notes. This was equivalent to Baiming's or Nanming's annual income. After Yang Taiju started smuggling, he had earned so much in just a few times. This did not even include the huge expenses. From this, one could see how big the profits were. Other than the gold and silver, there were actually 2088 rifles, 300 sharp swords and spears, hundreds of sets of armor, and dozens of boxes of bullets and grenades. When these things were piled up like a small mountain in the courtyard of the Yang residence, Yang Shan finally lost his imposing manner and fell to the ground with a plop. At this moment, Yang Shan finally understood how big his son's ambition was. He also finally understood what it meant to raise a tiger for calamity. It was just that he was raising his son. The moment these things came out, Yang Taiju lowered his arrogant head. He knew that he was done for. On the other hand, Lung Song was sweating profusely. He didn't dare to imagine what would happen if these weapons suddenly launched an attack. Even if Crimson City did not fall into chaos, it would be difficult to protect some important institutions. Investigate, investigate, investigate for me. How did these things appear here? These are not things that can be bought with money. Yang Wu roared as he looked at the grenades and 88 rifles. Then his gaze landed on Yang Shan. On behalf of the 6th Young Master, I announce that from now on, you are no longer the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Men, take him away and lock him in jail. Ma Dali will be the acting Minister of Foreign Affairs. You will also be in charge of the interrogation of Yang Shan. As Yang Shan's deputy, Ma Dali understood his superior very well. Letting someone who understood you to interrogate you would achieve twice the result with half the effort. Yang Wu did not doubt this point. The Yang family was finished. And that night, some people who had close ties with the Yang family were implicated. More than 50 officials were arrested. Among them were a few company cadres and a battalion commander from Cold Front. And this matter had only just begun. As the interrogation progressed, more and more people were implicated. Even the Bureau's Director General, Xinyu, was invited away by the Security Bureau the next morning. The person in charge of the interrogation was none other than Director General Yang San. Using interrogation instead of interrogation meant that Yang San was under Yang Qindong's orders to reprimand Xinyu. The gist of his words was that his job was very special. It was a job that offended others, but he did not have to be afraid of offending others because he had the 6th Young Master backing him up. He knew how hard it was for him and how he was a person. But if he was afraid of offending others, he could quit his job. He could go home and retire. He could also be given a leisurely department to pass the days. But in short, he had to do his job well as long as he was in office. Otherwise, he would not occupy this position. Facing Director General Yang San, who was under the orders of the Duke of Loyalty, Xinyu did not dare be careless. He immediately nodded to express his understanding and promised that such a thing would not happen again. If he encountered any injustice or lawlessness, he would be the first to stand up. At the same time, he thanked the Duke of Loyalty for his trust in him. Chapter 738. People are like this. Once they are in a high position, they are not willing to give up their power. Xinyu was like this. After experiencing the prestige of the monitoring bureau chief, he was reluctant to leave. Even if he knew that what he was about to do would offend a lot of people, he was still unwilling to leave. Since Xinyu had already expressed his stance, Yang Sen also allowed him to make his choice. However, before they parted ways, he reminded him, "This matter is not over yet. There will be others who will come looking for you. You just have to wait. I hope that you can perform well." He did not say who was looking for him, nor did he say what it was about. Yang San left, leaving Xinyu with a mystery in his heart. This mystery did not last long. Just as he was about to get off work, someone from the security bureau came to invite Xinyu to the famous Min Lufu restaurant in the city for a banquet. Xinyu knew about Min Lufu. Usually, many people with status were willing to hold their banquets there. He also heard that the background of the restaurant was very strong, but outsiders did not know the specifics. Since Yang San sent someone to inform him and since he had already said hello, Xinyu would naturally go. After getting off work, he went straight to Min Lufu restaurant. When he arrived at the restaurant, which covered an area of more than 10,000 square meters, there were already people waiting for him outside. When they saw him arrive, they led him straight to the third floor. In the private room on the third floor, when Xinyu opened the door and entered, he realized that he was not the first to arrive. The 1st Division Commander of the Navy, Gao Xiong, and the political department's Mo Qingyu had arrived before him. Gao Xiong was the commander of the Navy's 1st Division. It was said that the Duke of Loyalty wanted to expand the division into an army. If nothing unexpected happened, this person would become the 1st Navy commander. Ji Qingyu was one of the members of the political department. He was also the political commissar of the Army's 1st Division. There were already rumors that he would become the 1st Vice Minister of the political department. One of them represented the Navy's 1st Division, and the other represented the Army's 1st Division. Their arrival seemed to explain some things. When the three of them met, they naturally had to exchange greetings. However, their personal relationship wasn't very deep. This had to do with their identities and statuses, and also because they each represented different forces. It was impossible for them to sit together and drink and chat merrily. Where there are people, there are rivers and lakes. This sentence was also very appropriate to use here. Even though Yangxia hadn't been established for a long time, and many of them were newcomers, fighting seemed to be something that humans were born with. It was the kind that didn't need to be taught. You could learn it very well and play it very smoothly. Since there were benefits, there would be fights. When it came to who could get more and who could only get less, a struggle was inevitable. Yang Qindong couldn't do anything about this. Of course, this was something he was happy to see. The people below him were all as good as one person. This was not good for his management in the future. The private room was very spacious, at least 100 square meters. The three of them sat in 3 different directions and soon there was silence. Perhaps they were all wondering why Director Yang San had invited them here. What was he going to do? What kind of performance should they have? Just as the 3 of them were still immersed in their fantasies, the door suddenly opened and 2 people came in. When the 2 of them appeared, the 3 people in the room hurriedly stood up, their faces filled with respect from the bottom of their hearts. There was no other way. The people who came were the director of the security bureau, Yang San, and the future 6th Madam Luan Xiaoyu. Yes, the one who came with Yang San was Luan Xiaoyu. Not only did she come, but she also walked in front. From this point alone, she should be the host of today's meal. Hello, Director Luan. Because Luan Xiaoyu also had the identity of Director of Publicity, before she was brought into the palace by Yang Qindong's legal wife, everyone was used to calling her Director Luan. Hello everyone, I've made you wait for a long time. I'm really sorry. I just came out from City Lord Yu's place. Luan Xiaoyu had a smile on her face. Although she was very young and was still a few years away from 18 years old, the long-term training had shown the results. She showed a very mature side. Even when she saw 3 people with great power, she didn't show the slightest bit of fear. Luan Xiaoyu was very clear in her heart. Who gave her everything today and why the 3 people in front of her respected her. It was precisely because of this that after receiving Yang Qindong's telegram, she quickly returned to Crimson City from below. She began to carry out the following reforms, investigating the other movements. After the incident with Yang Qindong felt that it was always right to nip the problem in the bud. He couldn't always see the serious consequences before coming out to take care of everything. If that was the case, it would only cause unnecessary internal friction. After making this decision, he placed this heavy responsibility on Luan Xiaoyu. Yang Qindong knew that Luan Xiaoyu was still young, but this person was absolutely loyal to him. Her love for him was also the purest. He didn't have to worry about her betrayal. Moreover, as his woman, she should experience more storms. After all, he couldn't imagine what kind of achievements he would achieve in the future. If the women by his side were too ordinary, then it would really harm them. In the future, when Yang Dong entered the headquarters, he had watched some TV dramas when he had nothing to do. There were quite a few dramas in Guangdong. Although he didn't want that scene to happen to him, as his woman, she had to have the ability to protect herself. This was him helping Luan Xiaoyu grow up in advance. After accepting this mission, Luan Xiaoyu also knew that this was Dong Shuai's way of reminding her, so she made up her mind to perform better to prove herself. Thus she came. Not only did she come, she even went to Yu Qian's office before coming. She chatted with this senior for a long time and decided on the direction of her work. The only regret was that Yu Qian did not accept Luan Xiaoyu's invitation. Even if it was Yang Qindong's intention, the result would be the same. In Yu Qian's words, his main job was still the development of Qiqian City. As for the other work, he would do his best to cooperate, but he would not delve too deeply into it. After all, a person's energy was limited. Yu Qian's rejection was actually for Luan Xiaoyu's sake. Because with his prestige, if he really participated in this matter, she would have nothing to do with it. When she really achieved results, her achievements would also be covered up. Thus, Luan Xiaoyu was grateful from the bottom of her heart for this senior's care and guidance. The moment she entered the private room, Luan Xiaoyu told everyone about her meeting with Yu Qian. This was equivalent to telling everyone that what she wanted to do not only obtain the consent and attention of the sixth young master. This could be seen from her own identity and the fact that Bureau Chief Yang San accompanied her throughout the entire process. She also obtained the full cooperation of the city lord, Yu Qian. The three people present were all extremely intelligent. They immediately understood what he meant, and the smiles on their faces widened a little. Since a matter had received so much support, there was no way they could refuse. Luan Xiaoyu walked into the private room, and after greeting the three of them, she did not immediately sit down. Instead, she walked to the window of the private room and looked out. At this time, the sky was already dark, but the street lights in Crimson City were already lit up. One could see commoners coming and going on the streets. It was very lively. Not far away, some of the nearby residential areas were also lit up with electric lights. Looking from afar, it really looked like tens of thousands of homes were lit up. According to Yang Qindong's intention, there was no curfew in Crimson City unless there were special circumstances. As time passed, not only were the commoners used to it, it was still very lively even at night. There were even some tea houses, restaurants, brothels and casinos that had better business at night. This promoted the rich life of the entire city and promoted the economic development of this place. Yes, there were brothels and casinos in Crimson City. However, these industries were not something that everyone could do. They required a special industry certificate issued by the city lord's mansion, and the taxes were heavy. On this point, Yang Qindong was also clear that there were some things that could not be truly prohibited. Rather than letting others secretly hide and do it, it was better to openly take it out and standardize it. He could also collect more business taxes and use it to serve the army and the people. Wouldn't that be better? So lively. Looking out the window, Luan Xiaoyu could not help but say with emotion, "Yes, so lively. This kind of scene can't be seen even in Beiming or southern Ming's capital." Xinyu also stood up and came to the window. Looking at everything in front of him, he also sighed with emotion. Such a lively place needs to be protected by us. Just based on this, we should all feel proud. Finally, Luan Xiaoyu's seemingly unintentional words began to lead to the main topic of today's conversation. Hearing this, Xinyu and the other two's expressions turned cold. No one said anything. After all, Yang Tieju's matter had just happened. If everyone sang praises now, it would be too much of a bootlicker. The others did not say anything, only Luan Xiaoyu continued. Today I called everyone here because of my idea, and also because of the sixth young master's idea. After Yang Tieju's matter, he even secretly hid weapons. This might be a special case, but at the same time, it also shows that we did not do our job well. There should be many people and departments involved in this matter, but we were completely unaware of it. In the end, we had to rely on the sixth young master to remind us what to do. Doesn't everyone feel ashamed because of this? Luan Xiaoyu's voice became louder and louder. At the end, there was a hint of reprimand in her voice. Chapter 739. She couldn't be blamed for being so angry. There were indeed quite a few people involved in this matter. Let's not talk about anything else. Let's just talk about the weapons found in Yang Shan's residence. Let's not talk about the 2088 rifles for now. Just this one alone was enough to implicate a lot of people. What about the remaining swords and spears? Those were all products of the arsenal, far from the hoes and kitchen knives in the hands of ordinary people. They could be seen everywhere on the streets. These weapons were all made of iron, steel, and alloys. The production of every finished product was recorded. Not only that, so many weapons also required a lot of energy to be maintained daily. Otherwise, after a long time, the weapons would rust. In order to prevent this, not to mention wiping them frequently, they also needed to use vegetable oil. That was also a product of the military, and not something that ordinary people could buy with money. The weapons found in the Yang residence were all as shiny as new. It could be seen that they were usually maintained by people. Then the question was, who provided these materials? It was likely that many people would be implicated in the investigation. And these people sold the forbidden products to Yang Taiju. Did they not think about the consequences and what would happen? There were also the 3 cargo ships and dozens of carriages of goods that were hijacked. It could be said that there were all kinds of things inside, such as divine realm, cosmetics, and women's clothes. Other than that, there were also things like cigarettes, ham sausages, canned food, and instant noodles. Many of them were only provided to the army and had not been circulated on the market. But now they were all smuggled out. Could Yang Taiju alone do all these things? It was obviously unreasonable. If this matter was thoroughly investigated, who knew how many people would be implicated? After saying so much, it was just to clarify one thing, and that was that there were probably many people involved in Yang Tieju's matter, and even more people knew about it. But why did the higher-ups not make a move? Could it be that they did not know? That was absolutely impossible. If that was the case, these people would not be in high positions. In the end, there was only one possibility, and that was that too many people knew about it, but they dealt with it with the mentality that it was better to avoid trouble. Everyone had the idea of sweeping the snow in front of their own door. As long as they did not participate in some matters, it would not be wrong. With such a mentality, Yang Taiju was able to do things like a fish in water, which made the problem become more serious. This time, if Yu Mian hadn't arrived at the origin city, met Yang Qindong and voiced out his concerns, he was afraid that if he had waited for a while, once it erupted, it would have caused an unimaginable result. This was also the reason why Yang Qindong was so angry and wanted to investigate the source of his investigation. Luan Xiaoyu closed the window in front of her and the private room quickly fell into silence. Her voice was also clearly transmitted to the ears of the 4 people present. Let's talk business first. The dishes will be served later. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone including Yang San, sat up straight and entered a state of semi-war. Luan Xiaoyu was very satisfied with everyone's attitude. She lightly nodded and casually said, "The 6th young master has ordered us to form a group of 5, which is the 5 of us. From today onwards, we will carry out a self-inspection for 3 months. Every local official, regardless of their position, was required to be thoroughly investigated. Every military officer up to the rank of a platoon in the army was also required to be investigated from head to toe. Once a problem is found, it must be verified immediately. If it is confirmed, what should be done is done. If there is no problem, they must be reassured and continue their work. If there is an outstanding person, they should be rewarded. Let's put it this way. The 6th young master has handed over the authority to deal with matters to the 5 of us. We have a great responsibility. Do you have confidence?" "Yes." At this moment, no one would raise a different opinion. This was the 6th young master's order. If anyone dared to stand out and say no, their future achievements would come to an end. Naturally, more importantly, this kind of self-inspection was very necessary. This was also a method to prevent something similar to Yang Taiju from happening again. "All right." Seeing everyone's support, Luan Xiaoyu continued, "As for the specific details of the work, we will have to discuss it in detail later. The first thing we need to do now is to announce Yang Tieju's case to the public. The investigation and evidence collection will be left to the Special Inspector Bureau and the Security Bureau. After everything is clarified, we will immediately hold a public trial in the city. We need to let everyone in the city know what is going on. Yes, our bureau will definitely cooperate fully. The Security Bureau will also cooperate fully." Yang San and Shin Yu quickly expressed their stance. "Very good." Luan Xiaoyu continued nodding. Then a sly smile appeared in her eyes. "Things have to be done one step at a time. Next, let's proceed with the first item, eating." He. The words eat eased the tense atmosphere. Even Yang San, who was usually reserved, chuckled at this moment. The 5-man team was established, and the self-inspection activities were in full swing. This would eventually affect all the departments. All the cadres and officers carried out their activities quickly and ruthlessly. On the first day, more than 40 cadres from various departments were taken away. Among them, 6 were military officers. On the second day, more than 50 were taken away. On the third day, more than 70 were taken away. On the fourth day, more than 90 were taken away. It wasn't until the fifth day that the number began to decrease. More than 60 people were taken away. Then the number rose and fell. More and more cadres were taken away for questioning. Some of them couldn't come out after entering the 5-man team. These were all people with major problems. There were also some who were released a few days after entering, but they had already been demoted or even fired from their positions. They directly became ordinary citizens. There were also some who were released not long after and continued to shine brightly at work. There were even some who were directly promoted after coming out, replacing the position of a superior who had made a mistake. There were some who were promoted by 1, 2, or 3 ranks. This was a huge reshuffle. It had been about 5 years since Crimson City became Yang Xie's headquarters. Many of them had benefited from this, and many of them had their lives changed. From having problems with food and drink in the past, they were now living a life of luxury. However, this still made some people unhappy. They felt that they should have received more. Even if Yang Qindong implemented a high salary policy, and their salaries were enough to cover their family's expenses, there were still some who couldn't help but reach out. In the face of such a greedy person, of course, Yang Qindong wouldn't be polite. This time he checked again and eliminated all the black sheep with such thoughts. One could imagine that after this incident, the atmosphere of the entire Crimson City would change. In the future, the efficiency of work would also become faster and faster. The self-inspection activities were still ongoing, and many people's fates had changed. Some who benefited from their work were promoted, while some who were greedy received their deserved retribution. At this moment, Yang Qindong sent another telegram to Luan Xiaoyu. A new policy to raise the treatment of officials had been implemented, and that was the special ticketing system. The so-called special ticketing system was similar to the planned economy in the early days of the Republic, where the citizens would be given food stamps to purchase meat and grains. Yang Qindong requested for the officials to be given a certain percentage of their monthly salary. Once they had such ticketing, they would have priority to purchase some sought-after goods in the market. For example, cigarettes, all sorts of beverages, bottles of strong liquor, magical mirrors, high-grade cosmetics, and beautiful women's clothing. For this, Yang Qindong requested for a store to be set up in Crimson City. This store had a complete range of goods and the quantity was sufficient. However, there was a difference, and that was that everything had to be purchased with special ticketing systems. Here, silver and even gold were useless. The reason for such a decision was that there were too many officials in the 5-man investigation team. In addition, the momentum was very large, which caused many people to feel fear. There were actually not enough officials to go around. In order to make more capable people work for him, Yang Qindong decided to give them some benefits. Under such temptation, he was not afraid that some people would not be loyal to him. It had to be said that when the special ticketing system appeared, the ticketing systems in the hands of the officials became popular goods. Although there were a lot of factories in Crimson City, and a lot of good things because there were too many merchants outside, the supply could not meet the demand. As a result, even in Crimson City, some items were difficult to buy. With the special ticketing system in the store, those good things that could not be bought outside were actually available here. The ticketing system became a hard currency, and some of the rich people started to have ideas about the ticketing systems in the hands of the officials. The officials were also humans and they also wanted to live a better life. The ticketing systems in their hands were not enough for their own use, so how could they sell them? Even if some people wanted to sell a portion of it for some reason, it was difficult to satisfy the needs of more rich people. Over time, some people had no choice but to give up on buying it and think of ways to become officials themselves. Yang Qindong's move caused the number of people who applied for the official exam to increase by a lot, greatly alleviating the pressure and fear brought to everyone by the 5-man team. Crimson City finally continued to move forward amidst the wind and rain. After many new officials took up their positions, the effects in all aspects were indeed much faster than before. Just from this point alone, it seemed that the previous efforts were worth it. Just as the 5 young misses were carrying out their operation with great momentum, Su Munair was not idle either. She left the palace several times to look for good seedlings in the CIA. Her request was a little strange. She requested for all of them to be women because she believed that some things were more convenient for women to do than men. Chapter 740. After obtaining Yang Qindong's approval and support, Su Munaer not only received a large amount of funds for her activities, but she was also allowed to enter the refugee camp in Crimson City to find suitable seedlings among the 5 million people who made the deal with the southern Ming Empire. Under such generous conditions, girls and women were chosen by Su Munaer one after another. They became the first batch of important personnel in the CIA and became the cornerstone of the CIA's development. In this incident, many people were also caught in the crossfire because they did not perform their duties properly. There were many people in the military and the local government. However, at the same time, the working environment became more pure. Even the relationship between the military and the political department was eased to a certain extent. Lung Song's name was not in the 5-man team. Although he was the political commissar of the 1st Division, Mo Qingyu, and it looked the same, only he knew that it was because he was the main force in the confrontation between the military and the political department. There was also a period of time when he was very close to Yang Shanjia. This was clearly a warning from the 6th young master to him. From the moment the 5-man team was formed, the smart Lung Song immediately changed his strategy. He no longer resisted the work of the political department. Instead, he cooperated with it. This also allowed the military's work to be greatly improved. When the news reached Yang Qindong's ears in the first city, he smiled and was very satisfied. If a force wanted to develop, it was just like life. It would always encounter problems. The key was the kind of mentality one had to solve the problem and not blindly escape and endure. Only by cutting off one's wrist would there be a new life. Otherwise, even if one was still alive, one would not be a healthy person. The matter of Crimson City had returned to the right path. In the process of returning, there would definitely be some pain. Some people and old friends would also be cut off from fate. However, the path that should be taken still had to be taken. The development of the first city was also imminent. These days, Yang Qindong not only had his eyes on Crimson City, but also sent a few telegrams to understand the situation. The development and construction of the first city were not lagging behind. These days, Yumian woke up early and slept late every day. He finally understood the situation in the city and had a general guideline for what to do next. Today he took the initiative to come to the city lord's mansion to report to Yang Qindong. He was told that the 6th young master was inspecting the work in the logistics department. The so-called logistics department was just a general term. Because the first city was not as complete as the Crimson City, many of the supplies transported from outside were piled up in the logistics department. Today Yang Qindong came here to inquire about the situation of the supplies. In addition, he came to see the situation of the soldiers receiving the new weapons here, the Big Dipper crossbow, also known as Big Dipper steel crossbow. The so-called Big Dipper crossbow was a new type of crossbow made of pure steel. Unlike the traditional ones, it was more pocket-sized. However, being short didn't mean that it wasn't powerful. On the contrary, because the spring was strong enough, it could shoot a distance of 100 meters. This kind of Big Dipper crossbow could be tied to the arm and shot at the enemy. More importantly, it was equipped with a mechanism that allowed it to fire 7 arrows at once. This greatly increased its lethality and increased its chances of victory on the battlefield. With the current ability of the Crimson City Munitions Factory, it wasn't a problem to create a Type 81 assault rifle. However, it would still take a lot of time to create a qualified Type 95 assault rifle. How to save the use of the Type 95 assault rifle and what weapon to use to replace it was the problem that the people of the Crimson City Munitions Factory had to think about and face during this period of time. Someone suggested that if it didn't work, the Cold Front Army should use the Type 81 assault rifle again. However, this idea was quickly rejected. Not to mention that with the current factory ability of the munitions factory, the number of Type 81 assault rifles that they could create was limited and could not be provided to all the Cold Front Army soldiers. Just by giving up on the Type 95 assault rifle, once that person became used to it, the research and development work would only be slower. Then, no one knew when they could create the real Type 95 assault rifle. The people of the munitions factory also needed to be stressed. This debate was finally reported to Yang Qindong in the form of a telegram. He waved his pen and gave the final decision. The development of the Type 95 assault rifle could not be stopped. They could also increase the number of people and funds. For the time being, they could find a weapon to replace the Type 95 assault rifle as a transitional product. Under such a decree, the Big Dipper crossbow appeared. How is it? How's the accuracy? In the logistics team, Yang Qindong looked at the 3rd Division's division commander Wu Sheng and political commissar Chen Bo, who came to collect the equipment, and asked with a smile. Reporting to the 6th young master, The Big Dipper crossbow is very good. Qin Bo immediately stood at attention and said respectfully. The crossbow can shoot continuously, which is equivalent to shooting continuously. Moreover, the size of the crossbow is smaller, so more of them can be carried on the body. After training, the accuracy can also be improved. However, the shooting distance is too short, only 100 meters. The 3rd Division's division commander Wuxia also gave his evaluation. In the end, he pointed out the shortcomings and expressed his dissatisfaction. Alright, this is just a crossbow. Even if it can shoot continuously, it's still a crossbow. How far do you want to shoot? Moreover, when the enemy is far away, you can still use the Type 95 assault rifle. Yang Qindong patted Wu Sheng's shoulder and warned others to be content with what they had. Although the Type 95 assault rifle was used for a long time, there would be some wear and tear and damage. However, with the efforts of Wu Hua and the other blacksmiths, as long as the damage wasn't too severe, simple repairs could still be done. If it really didn't work, Yang Qindong could just use the big warehouse. The Type 95 assault rifle was stored in boxes and boxes. If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted to give enough pressure to the Crimson City arsenal, he wouldn't have thought of using a weapon like the Big Dipper crossbow. Of course, Yang Qindong's actions were also a display of confidence. The current Lung Feng's Division 3 division, even if they didn't have guns, their battle strength was still very strong. This kind of army was what he needed. Normally they would use cold weapons. Against strong enemies they would use guns. With this combination, the Lung Feng division would definitely become the strongest army in the world. Only then would they have the strength to conquer more places and territories. Wu Sheng also knew that his expectations were a little too high, so he chuckled and nodded. 6th young master, please be at ease. The 3 of us have been diligently training. Even if we use the same weapons as our opponents, we will still be able to win. Yes, that's what I want. Yang Qindong laughed, showing that he was in a good mood. Young Master, City Lord Yu Mian is here. While Yang Qindong was still chatting and commenting on the Big Dipper crossbow with the officers of the 3 divisions, Beta Persei walked to Yang Qindong's side and reported. I'll go take a look. Motioning for Wu Sheng, Qin Bo, and the others to continue working, Yang Qindong turned around and walked out of the logistics group's gate under the protection of a group of guards. He saw Yu Mian waiting there. When he saw Yang Qindong, the first thing he said was, 6th young master, I want a farm near the first city. Farm. Yang Qindong looked at Yu Mian in a daze and became interested. Continue. Seeing that Yang Qindong did not object to him immediately, Yu Mian knew that his idea should be feasible. He immediately said, 6th young master, I've already investigated. The reason why the people here are very poor and sometimes even have problems eating is not because they are not hardworking, nor is it because the soil here is not good. Although it's called yellow soil, as long as you plant properly, you can still grow good crops. They don't dare to plant because safety has always been a problem. The Mongols lived by herding. This was a way of life left behind by their ancestors. It was also because it was more flexible. On the grassland, the strong preyed on the weak. The strong would always be able to obtain more resources. Imagine what kind of strength did an ordinary person have. If he chose to farm, it would be equivalent to imprisoning himself in a certain area. Usually it was fine, but once he encountered an enemy attack and danger came, he could drive the flock of sheep away. However, he could not take the crops planted on the ground with him. That would only benefit the invading enemy. As time passed, no one thought about farming anymore. On this point, Yu Mian had talked to many people in the city, including many Han people. They did indeed live by farming, and when they first came to the grassland they were not used to it. However, because there was no safe place, they could only give up on the idea of farming and being self-sufficient. Now, with the appearance of the mercenaries and their strength, they had become some sort of guarantee, allowing some people to see hope again. Thus they made this request. After Yu Mian investigated for a while, he also felt that this matter was feasible. Thus he came to find Yang Qindong and proposed his idea. Yes, it's farming. I thought about it. Not only can he solve the problem of food for the army on the spot, once the people have land, they will also have a strong sense of belonging. This way they will be able to gather people's hearts faster and make the first city prosperous and prosperous. Yu Mian said excitedly. Yes, this is a good idea. However, it's already August now. In addition to the cold winter here, I'm afraid it's too late this year. Yang Qindong nodded and began to analyze the reality of the matter from the actual operation. Yes, it's too late this year. In fact, we don't have the seeds of the crops. All of this needs time to prepare. I've already thought about it. We can contact Crimson City now and ask them to provide more seeds. We can wait for them to be delivered in spring next year. As for now, we can first open up the fertile land, measure it, and distribute it to the citizens who are already in the first city. This way they will have hope, and the first city can also attract more people to come and seek refuge. Yumian still said with an excited face. From this point it could be seen that he had indeed put in some effort. Yang Qindong did not answer immediately. Instead, he nodded after thinking carefully. I think it's possible. Then you can go ahead and do it. This way we can open up the fertile land and tell the people that they don't have to worry about their safety. As long as the mercenaries are here, they will protect their fruits of victory. When the enemy comes, we can just beat them away. Chapter 741. Yang Qindong suddenly thought of using greenhouses to grow crops. However, since he did not have any fertile land and had not made the necessary preparations, he decided to let Crimson City prepare the greenhouses and greenhouses. Before these things arrived, there was no need to inform Yumian. Yumian did not know what Yang Qindong was thinking, but he was waiting for these words. On the prairie without sufficient strength, one would not dare to do anything. Now that he had the protection of Yang Qindong in the army, he was overjoyed. Yes, sixth young master, please wait for the good news next year. Yumian left happily, leaving Yang Qindong behind to mutter in his heart, looks like there's a need to use force to intimidate others. If you want others to be afraid of you, then you have to learn how to show your fist and let others know how developed your muscles are and how powerful you are. Just as Yang Qindong was thinking about who to find as his opponent, an opportunity came knocking on his door. That night, the director of the First City Security Bureau, Feng Liang, came to visit. He brought with him news that someone was investigating the situation in the first city and was even trying to instigate a rebellion among the commoners in the city. Coincidentally, the mercenary army had won the battle and defeated the 50,000 cavalry led by Agador, allowing many of the commoners in the city to see hope. Some of the young and strong among them wanted to join the army. While contributing their strength, they also wanted to fight for a future for themselves. However, because there were too many captives from the battlefield and the mercenary army's food and fodder were all supplied from the outside, the number of troops had already reached a limit and could not be increased anymore. Thus, they did not choose to expand the army, and the young and strong people in the city naturally did not have the chance to join the mercenary army. At that time, it just so happened that Feng Liang was dealing with this matter. Due to various considerations, he gathered a few good young seedlings together and established a militia system, allowing them to be responsible for some of the security in the city. It was impossible to give them food, but they could still be given some silver every month. It was precisely this action that caused many people from the Security Bureau to appear in the city. And this time it was these people who had contributed. They discovered that there were outsiders who had entered the city and were still contacting the commoners. They felt that something was wrong, so they took the initiative to contact them. In the end, they found out that the other party's identity and purpose were actually trying to persuade the commoners to rebel. This was tantamount to breaking the stable life they had painstakingly obtained. How could these secret agents agree? They immediately took the man and sent him to Feng Liang. Who is it? And who does it represent? There was not the slightest bit of nervousness on Yang Qindong's face. He had been looking for someone to show off his muscles, and now that someone had come knocking on his door, he had no reason to be unhappy. The sixth young master. Feng, of course, from the Golden Family, the Mongol, the Golden Horde. The Golden Family? Yang Qindong nodded thoughtfully. After the death of Genghis Khan, only his direct descendants, namely the descendants of Jochi, Chagatai, Ogedai, and Talyui, were known as the Golden Family and qualified to inherit the throne of the Khans. After Talyui's son, Monk, became the great Khan of the Mongol, the range was further narrowed down to the descendants of Talyui. Later, the Yuan dynasty emperors and the Ming dynasty Tatar Khans such as Dayan Khan, were all from this line. The descendants of Genghis Khan established 4 Khanates, namely the Golden Horde, also known as the Kipchak Khanate, the Chagatai Khanate, the Ogedai Khanate, and the Ilkhanate. The Golden Horde was the territory of Genghis Khan's eldest son Jochi and grandson Zibadu. Because they were the descendants of Genghis Khan, they were called the Golden Family by the Mongols. They had great influence in the entire grassland. The Golden Horde was now the most powerful branch of the Golden Family. Until now they had occupied and ruled Russia, which spanned across the Eurasian continent, for more than 200 years. Yes, they are from the Golden Family. This Wuxia relied on this relationship and was very arrogant. Even if he was captured, he did not have any intention of lowering his head. Feng Liang nodded and reported. He did not dare not to report anything that was related to the Golden family. After all, this family represented the orthodox and had great influence on the grassland. For example, the leader of the Wala Yeshen was originally a strong military commander. He was also quite capable and ruled a strong grassland army. But why did he disappear in the end? After all, he was not a member of the Golden family. His force was also seen as a rebel army by the Mongols and was not orthodox. It was possible to be strong for a short period of time, but after a long period of time, everyone would ostracize you. If you still wanted to be king, you would be digging your own grave. Now that Yang Qindong was about to face the Golden family, it was inevitable that he would have to think more about it. Feng Liang stood there and did not say anything. He was waiting for the sixth young master's decision. If the sixth young master was not afraid of the other party, then of course he would teach the other party a lesson. If he had some concerns, then he would let the other party go. Sometimes showing weakness did not mean that one was really weak. It was just a preparation to be stronger. This kind of waiting did not take long. Yang Qindong said, "Interrogate this person carefully. The Golden Horde is thousands of miles away. We have to find out how this person came to the first city so quickly. Interrogate him carefully. I am afraid he will not speak casually." Feng Liang said with some difficulty. "Aha, if he does not speak, then you will use tricks. Don't say that the Security Bureau has no way to deal with him. In short, find out all the details about him and learn more about the Golden Horde. If the conditions are right, we will choose to take the initiative to attack." Yang Qindong looked at Feng Liang with a faint smile. When he said this, Feng Liang was shocked. He did not expect that the sixth young master was not afraid of the Golden Horde and even wanted to attack the Golden Horde. In this case, he certainly knew what to do. He immediately stood at attention, saluted and said confidently, "Sixth young master, please rest assured. I will definitely find out if he wet the bed when he was young." Since Yang Qindong had made up his mind, Feng Liang did not have any worries. When he returned to the Security Bureau's prison, the one who would suffer would be Wuxia. Relying on his background of the Golden Horde, Wuxia was used to being arrogant. Wherever he went, who would not give him some face? This was also the reason why he dared to go against Feng Liang. This was also the reason why he dared to openly collude with the people in the city to oppose the mercenaries. According to Wuxia, with his identity, even if he attracted the attention of the mercenaries, they would not dare to do anything to him. Didn't the Han people say that envoys would not be killed when two armies fought? Moreover, he was a member of the Golden Horde. But what he did not expect was that Feng Liang, who was very polite before, suddenly showed his fangs and tested all kinds of torture on him. Wuxia, who was used to being arrogant wherever he went, could not endure such pain. Even if his name was translated into Chinese, it meant loyalty. But at this moment, when faced with torture, he chose not to be loyal and told everything he knew. Just as Yang Qindong thought, Wuxia did not come from the Golden Horde. Time did not allow for it. The reason why he appeared in the beginning city in such a short time was that he came from the Gobi Mongol. As a member of the Golden Horde, Wuxia did not allow others to establish a strong force on the grassland. Anyone who dared to do so would be regarded as a provocation to the Golden Horde. So he stood up and came to the beginning city. After getting all the information he wanted, Feng Liang reappeared in the city lord's mansion early the next morning. With a pair of slightly bloodshot eyes, he reported the situation to Yang Qindong. Gobi Mongol? They really don't learn from their mistakes. Yang Qindong couldn't help but think of Tua Ye's appearance in his mind, especially the pair of magnificent big breasts. It was really difficult for people to forget after seeing it. Yes, it's the Gobi Mongol. According to Wuxia, after he arrived there, he was warmly received by Khan Sud. Soon after, he heard about our beginning city and then he volunteered to come. Feng Liang also smiled. He had a feeling that the sixth young master would not let the Gobi Mongol go easily this time. His feeling was soon confirmed. Yang Qindong narrowed his eyes and said, "Very well, after all, we have to show off our muscles. Then we'll choose them." Yang Qindong was determined to send troops to the Gobi Mongol. Wuxia's matter was just an excuse. He wanted to use this matter to warn some of the surrounding forces how powerful the mercenaries were. They'd better not have any ideas about it. Otherwise the person who would die would be you, not me. He was determined to take action. Soon all kinds of information about the Gobi Mongol were sent to Yang Qindong like snowflakes. The Gobi Mongol was distributed in the Mongol Empire, which was the Khalkha tribe. According to the information obtained, this tribe had about 600,000 soldiers, and its power was not small. However, because the area was too large, their power could not be concentrated at all. Every time they fought with outsiders, the number of troops they could mobilize became very limited. 600,000? It does have some momentum. After glancing at the number casually, Yang Qindong threw it aside. The so-called 600,000 was not in his eyes at all. After careful analysis, this number was really not a big deal. Other than the old people, children, and women, it was not bad if about 1/5 of the young people who could really ride horses and fight. There were only 120,000 of them, and they were spread out too thinly. They could only face tens of thousands of cavalrymen at most. Even Agador's 50,000 cavalrymen had been defeated, so there was no reason for them not to be able to defeat them. Chapter 742. Besides, even if it had a deterrent effect, if the opponent chosen was too weak, the effect would be limited. Summon all divisions and commanders for a military meeting. After issuing an order to Beta Persei, Yang Qindong walked straight to the newly built military building in the city. It didn't take long for the grassland to erupt into an uproar. 2 consecutive news broke the peace of the grassland in summer. The first news was that the beginning city had begun to open up wasteland nearby. Although the season was not right, it was obvious that they were preparing to plant crops next year. It was said that there were hundreds of thousands of acres of fertile land. This was naturally not much in the Central Plains, but on the grassland where war could break out at any time, this courage seemed a little big. Some of the powers were still wondering why the mercenaries were so daring. Were they not afraid that after planting the seeds, they would be robbed when it was time for the harvest? Just as this thought was still echoing in the minds of some of the leaders of the surrounding forces, the second news came. In view of the fact that the Mabe Mongolians had instigated Yukasai of the Golden Family to come to the beginning city to cause trouble, the mercenaries decided to fight back to shock the people. In other words, the mercenaries were going to choose the Mabe Mongolians as their opponent. The news had just been spread out, and some people were still confirming the authenticity of the news. The mercenary army had already gathered and went straight out of the city to the Jianghu area of Mabe Mongolian. As if to strengthen the deterrent effect, this time Yang Qindong personally led the troops. The troops were 5,200 people from the 3rd Division of the Cold Front, 3,000 people from the Jurchen Cavalry Regiment, 3,000 people from the Tatar Cavalry Regiment, and 3,200 people from the Reinforced Cavalry Regiment. A total of nearly 15,000 cavalry went out of the city. Tiger's Main's Independent Regiment, the 2nd Reinforced Cavalry Regiment, and the Logistics Regiment were left in the city. There were more than 10,000 people in total. Even if the enemy attacked, it was absolutely no problem to defend the beginning city for a certain period of time. The army exited the city. The mighty cavalry marched for several hours before exiting the city from the north and east gates. Then they gathered at one place outside the city and headed straight for Jianghu in a seemingly mighty manner. From the first city to the Jianghu area, one of the places that couldn't be bypassed was the Tatar-controlled Yendu city, which was also known as the Lingji Spring in the future. General Mu Ren, who was guarding the city, was terrified when he heard the news that 15,000 mercenaries were approaching. As a powerful local force, Mu Ren had 3,000 cavalrymen and 2,000 infantrymen. Speaking of which, Wanda City wasn't very big, nor was it flourishing. In fact, it was extremely poor. These soldiers were more than enough to protect themselves, but when faced with a mercenary army of 15,000 cavalrymen, he didn't have the slightest bit of confidence. Previously, Agadorji also belonged to the Tatar faction, and he had 50,000 cavalrymen. But wasn't he still defeated by the mercenaries? Now that they were facing each other, would they have a good ending? Was it possible to win? Mu Ren had no confidence at all. He had no choice but to cooperate with the mercenaries. Especially when he heard that one of his old friends was a senior general of the mercenaries, he immediately sent his own messenger to find the commander of the Tatar Cavalry Regiment, Suhi, and wanted to find out what was going on. Mu Ren sent a messenger, but Suhi didn't choose to meet him at the first time. Instead, he called Hayes Gashin, the commander of the regiment, and asked him to keep an eye on Mu Ren. Then he personally went to see Yang Qindong to inform the 6th young master of the matter. Suhi was originally a defeated general, but because of his outstanding ability, he was favored by Yang Qindong. For him, Yang Qindong also let go of the enemy Agadorji's son Haruichu. It could be said that he gave him enough face, so he offered his loyalty. This time he told Yang Qindong about the matter, which was a way to express his attitude. Knowing that Mu Ren wanted to cooperate with him, Yang Qindong said to Suhi with a smile on his face, "You can tell them that we don't intend to do anything to Wandu, but they also have to abide by their duty. Don't think of attacking the first city. Also, about Mabe Mongolia, they have to tell us as much as they know. If they are not sincere enough, then we may kill them together. Yang Qindong had the confidence to say such words. In his opinion, it was not a big deal. With 15,000 elite cavalrymen in his hand, a small city with only 5,000 soldiers was really not a big deal. Suhi took the order and went to see the messenger sent by Mu Ren. He conveyed the order of the sixth young master, and the messenger left in a daze. What was enough sincerity? Not only he couldn't explain it clearly, but Mu Ren himself also didn't understand it after hearing this answer. Forget it, don't think so much. Immediately send someone to write down all the information we know about Mabe Mongolia and give it all to the mercenaries. Mu Ren couldn't understand this sentence, but what he had to do was to do his best. If this couldn't satisfy the mercenaries, then they could only fight. He could only accept his fate. Hand it all over? Don't we need to keep some? Once the Mongolians of the Gobi Desert are heavily injured by the mercenaries, then our existence will become a real threat. The messenger reminded in a low voice. If we don't hand it all over, I'm afraid we can't survive this. Mu Ren shook his head as if he had made some kind of decision. Then he looked at the messenger and said, "Okay, go and do it now." They were all Mongolians in the grassland, so Mu Ren did collect a lot of information about Mabe Mongolia. Previously, he just wanted to protect himself. He was worried that the mercenaries would attack him, but he didn't expect that one day the information could be used to please the mercenaries and protect himself. After the news was summarized, the messenger worked hard again and sent it to Commander Su He. Finally, it was placed in front of Yang Qindong. Looking at the pile of information that was more than half a person high, Yang Qindong laughed and said, "Yes, it seems that this Mu Ren is still very sensible. That's the case, inform the vanguard leader Yella to bypass Mabe City and go straight to Jianghu." Yang Qindong knew that for so many years in the chaotic grassland, there were many different forces, and he couldn't solve all of them by himself. Since he couldn't do it for the time being, he had to set a benchmark, and that was to solve those hostile forces first. Mabe City was so close to the first city. If he could make them stay, it was equivalent to telling others that as long as they were honest, everyone could live in peace. Wasn't that an example? As for the Mabe Mongolia, they must be solved. Although it was very difficult to achieve the result of eliminating them, and it might not be possible with this little force, but it was necessary to severely injure the opponent. If he didn't do so, it would not be enough to intimidate others and not be able to establish his prestige. This time he brought out cavalry and the logistics team didn't follow him. The soldiers of the army each prepared dry food for 20 days. In other words, unless they could snatch a large amount of the enemy's food, they could only last for about 20 days. If they didn't succeed, they would have to return. This was also a habit of the Mongolian cavalry, or a helplessness due to the constraints of the environment. Without supplies, the logistics couldn't keep up. Who knew how many ambitious people would end up wasting their time on this matter? However, it was also because of this that the distance between each tribe was relatively far, forming a natural safe distance between each other. Just like the information sent by Mu Ren said, the entire Mabe Mongolia existed in the form of scattered tribes, and the farthest distance between their tribes was nearly 2,000 miles. That was to say, no matter how hard Yang Qindong tried, he couldn't run through the entire Mabe Mongolia's territory this time. Even if he couldn't go all the way, he would choose the key place to attack. Looking at the information sent by Mu Ren and comparing it with the map, Yang Qindong focused his attack on the area west of Inma River. Inma River was like a natural moat, established naturally. And in the north of it, there were many Mabe Mongolian tribes, such as Sanfeng Mountain and the Three Gorges Mouth, Kanhali village. But crossing the river to attack was originally a military taboo. It was equal to cutting off one's own retreat and fighting with the enemy. This wasn't what Yang Qindong wanted to see, and in the current situation he didn't need to take such a risk. It was better for him to stop there, and then continue to exert pressure on the Mabe Mongolian tribes in the area south of Inma River, forcing them to take the initiative to attack him. This was equal to turning passivity into initiative, and as long as the mercenaries made a big enough noise in the Jianghu area, he wouldn't worry about the Mabe Mongolian tribes not being fooled and not coming to find him. At that time he could wait for the enemy to be exhausted and fight with them. After making up his mind, the mercenaries were like a flying arrow, passing by the edge of the city and rushing straight to the Inma River area. Mabe Mongolian tribes. They had already known about the mercenary army's sudden invasion before the army had even arrived at Wandu City. After so many years of operation, it could be said that their scouts were everywhere. The mercenaries didn't mean to hide their tracks, so the news came immediately. The moment Khan received the news, he was so angry that his eyes widened and his beard blew. The mercenaries are so arrogant and infuriating. It was no wonder that Suitor would say that. He was the Khan of Gobi Mongol. He represented a powerful Mongol force. Most people were afraid that he would cause trouble for them. Who would take the initiative to provoke them? Not to mention that Wuxia was not a member of his tribe. He was an emissary of the Golden Horde, a member of the Golden Horde. What did their actions have to do with him? Head Suitor was very angry. He thought that the mercenaries were looking down on him. He thought that they didn't dare to provoke the Golden family, so they targeted him. What? Do you really think that you can look down on us just because you defeated us in the Battle of the Dwarf Rock? If that's the case, humph. Chapter 743. Suda did not immediately say what he was about to snort, but the expressions of his subordinates in the tent all changed. Zamubala, the burly man with the name of White Tiger, stood up and said, "Great Khan, think twice before you act. We're not afraid of the mercenaries, but there's no point in fighting with them since we're the ones who stand out. It'll only benefit others." "Yes, Great Khan, this kind of thing that benefits others is not worth it." Another general, Baoyin, also stood up and expressed his opinion. Both of them felt that it was not worth fighting with the mercenaries. Perhaps there was no benefit in winning, and it would only damage their strength if they lost. However, the mercenaries had defeated Agar Dorji's 50,000 cavalry, which made them feel afraid and did not want to fight. How could Swade not see through the thoughts of these two generals? He who did not want to fight took this opportunity to say, "Humph. Since the two generals have the same opinion, then let's retreat. Let's retreat to the north of Inma River first." Swade made the decision to retreat, which was a wise move. Speaking of which, the main force of Gobi Mongol was at the north of Inma River. He had already sent another general, Narasong, to gather the cavalry and young people of the tribes. The reason why he moved forward and occupied the Jianghu area was to control more territory and snatch more rich resources. However, now that the mercenaries had appeared and built the first city, it was equivalent to destroying all of his ideas. Sud Khan's retreat could be considered a wise choice. The dozens of tribes below had no choice but to put down their temporary encampments, leaving behind the beautiful grazing land in front of them and retreating together with the Khan. Not everyone was obedient. In this world there were always some people who were not afraid of anything. They were optimistic that even if the sky fell, there would be someone tall to hold it up. As for the fact that they were unknown to the public, no one would have any ideas about them. Speaking of which, there were many people like this. They could not make the decision to give up the beautiful water plants in front of them and chose to stay. They were hoping that the mercenaries wouldn't notice them at all and would just brush past them. They should be chasing after the main force of Sud Khan. In the past it was difficult for Yang Qindong to find them. But since he got the information provided by Mu Rin, he knew the distribution of the Mongolian tribes in the Jianghu area. When the scouts at the front sent news that the Suda Khan had begun to retreat, but there were still some small tribes and even some individual households that did not listen to the advice to leave, he immediately seized this opportunity. Nuzan Vanguard Regiment, don't stop. Continue to pursue and attack. Let the 1st Cavalry Regiment rush forward and rob the people and livestock. The Mongols were not the only ones who knew how to plunder people and resources. Mercenaries did the same. Currently, the first city was in the midst of development and construction. What it lacked the most was population. These were all good seedlings. According to their attitude of wanting money more than their lives, if these people were brought to the first city and saw the prosperous development there, they would not leave even if they were driven away. Yang Qindong's analysis was right. Those who knew that the mercenaries were coming but still did not give up their current territory were those who wanted money more than their lives. After they were robbed and brought to the first city, they quickly fell in love with it and made great contributions to the development and construction of the first city in the future. But that was all in the future. Let's talk about the present. When the head of Windchaser Regiment received the military order and began to plunder the Mongolian tribes separately, many people were shocked by this behavior. Didn't they say that robbing people and things was their specialty? Why did these Han Chinese troops learn from them? Was it a joke when others said that the great Ming dynasty was rich in resources and had a large population? No matter what these people thought, the 1st Cavalry Regiment of Windchaser Regiment did not show any mercy. From large tribes with hundreds of people to small individual households with only 3 to 5 people, they did not let any of them go. According to the information provided by Mu Rin before, they found every one of them accurately. In some places, according to the information, they could not see anyone, only some traces of tents. But in some places, they did find a large number of horses and sheep, as well as a small number of frightened Mongolian people. According to the military order, the mercenaries did not kill anyone. As long as the other party did not resist, they would only be taken away together with the animals. On the contrary, if they wanted to resist desperately, they would not show any mercy. Even before they got close to the enemy, the arrows from a distance were enough to kill them. This led to a situation where Sud Khan led the army and kept walking in front. Behind him, more and more tribal people who refused to leave became captives in the hands of the mercenaries. When this kind of news began to gather one by one, it finally aroused strong dissatisfaction from Sud Khan. Even the generals and soldiers below had angry expressions on their faces. Although he was angry, Sud Khan also knew that if he went back now and fought with the mercenaries, both sides would suffer losses. For the future, for the big picture, he could only bear with it. However, his mouth still did not let them off. Mercenaries, remember this. The contempt and sin that you have imposed upon us today will be paid back tenfold or even 100-fold in the future. In just 12 days, the 1st Cavalry Regiment of Windchaser Regiment had captured 5,000 Mongolian people, and the number of horses and sheep that they had captured was uncountable. With so many captives and resources suddenly increasing, the speed of the mercenaries was greatly affected, and the army started to slow down. Luckily, they had captured too much, especially some of the Mongolians who resisted. After they died, the horses and sheep became ownerless and could be used by the mercenaries. Kill some of the ownerless fat sheep to replenish the army's food. At the same time, send someone to inform Commander Yella to slow down and wait for our army to meet up. After knowing that Yella's Nuzan Cavalry Regiment was a day's journey away from the main army, Yang Qindong gave this order. Yang Qindong's military sense was really strong. The moment he felt that something was wrong, he immediately corrected it. However, this order was still a little too late. At this time, the Nuzan Cavalry Regiment was already being watched closely by Sud Khan. They had been chased for 12 days and the Mongol army had even escaped first, so they had more than 12 days to escape. Finally, they came to the side of the river. Once they crossed this river, they would be able to meet up with more Mongol cavalry regiment. By the time they reached this point, Sudur Khan's confidence had also become a lot stronger. Especially when the scouts at the rear sent news that a 3,000-man cavalry was 50 to 60 li behind them, while the main force of the mercenaries would take a full day to reach them. A smile that hadn't been seen for a long time appeared in Sudur Khan's eyes. Haha, only 3,000 cavalry, and you dare to chase us so close? Since you don't know life from death, don't blame me for eating you. The enemy's forces were so small and Sud Khan saw hope. After continuously retreating, the morale of the entire tribe was very low, and they urgently needed a victory to boost their morale. He immediately called his subordinates, Zamubala and Baoyin, and told them his thoughts. Sud Khan looked at them expectantly, waiting for their decision. The two generals did not expect Sud Khan to have the idea of fighting with the mercenaries. However, when they heard that the enemy only had 3,000 cavalry behind them, they became excited. Although the mercenaries were tough bones and were not easy to chew, the result was that both sides would suffer heavy losses. However, the enemy only had 3,000 cavalry, and even if they fought, their losses would be limited. The important thing was that they had been running for so many days, and had long been suppressing the anger in their hearts. If they had the chance to vent it out, it would raise the morale of the army and the people. Fight. The two generals hesitated for a moment before making the same decision. You can't fight. While Sud Khan was still excited about the actions of the two generals, another crisp voice came from the entrance of the tent, and then Princess Narain Tuya's figure walked into the tent. Because of her figure, her boundless chest squeezed in before she arrived. Then Princess Tuya's beautiful figure appeared. She first glared at the two generals, especially Baoyin. This person had previously said that the mercenaries were very powerful, and fighting with them would not be worth the loss. But now he actually advocated for a fight, which made her somewhat disappointed. After looking at the two generals, Tuya's gaze fell on Sud Khan. Father, you can't fight. The mercenaries are very powerful, and even the Walla's best fighter, Yes Hen, is not their opponent. Previously, there was the news of Agador's 50,000 cavalry being wiped out. If we fight with them, it will be difficult to win. What does a girl know? Seeing that his daughter dared to question his father's decision, Sud Khan's face immediately showed anger. To be able to become a Khan, there must be something good about him. After being in the position for so long, his body had formed a unique domineering aura. Normally, even someone as valiant as Zamubala wouldn't dare look him in the eyes. However, today in front of Tuaya she wasn't afraid at all. She looked straight back at her father's eyes. Fighting with the mercenaries will only cause our Gobi Mongol to fall into a state of eternal damnation. Living in the grasslands since childhood, Tuya was used to seeing people fight to the death with their enemies, and this made her admire heroes even more. And a long time ago, when she learned that the traitor of the grasslands had also been defeated by a young talent of the great Ming dynasty, she began to admire him. She had always wanted to meet him to see what kind of person he was, to be able to defeat this traitor of the grasslands with less than 1/10 of his military strength. Chapter 744. However, Tuaya, who was not fated to enter the great Ming dynasty, thought that there was no hope in her life. She never thought that she would meet him on the grassland one day. However, she did not know him and missed him in the end. After the battle, when she found out that the Han youth who saved her from Hararushi was the war god of the great Ming dynasty that she had admired for a long time, she even had the idea of going to the beginning city to see this war god again. Her worship made Tuaya interested in Yang Chendong. Although it was not to the extent that she had feelings for him, at least she had a good impression of him. However, this was not enough to make her lose her mind. Especially when she saw her father's failed sneak attack last time, she sadly discovered that they seemed to have become enemies. Would there be a good result if she took the initiative to meet the enemy? However, she really wanted to see Yang Chendong and tell him that she admired him very much. Under such psychological contradictions, the mercenaries suddenly sent out their troops, and their target was the Mongol tribe in the Gobi Desert. When she first heard the news, Tuaya was a little angry. However, she thought about it from Yang Chendong's perspective. First, there was a sneak attack for no reason, and then there was the suspicion of instigating Wuxia. It seemed that the decision to send out troops was not a big deal. When the mercenaries sent out their troops, her father immediately made the decision to retreat, which made Tuaya very happy. Dodging the mercenaries' attack this time was a sign of weakness, but it was also a sign of goodwill. With this experience, as long as her father was willing to lower his head, it would be possible for him to become friends with the mercenaries. Tuaya believed that a true hero would not lower himself to the same level as a weakling. In a happy mood, although they were escaping, Tuaya's face was full of smiles. However, now that she suddenly heard that her father was going to fight with the mercenaries, and it was going to be a fight with many people, she wanted to take advantage of the situation and immediately stopped him. If this battle was fought, then no matter if they won or lost, they would only be enemies with the mercenaries in the future. It would be difficult for them to become friends. This was definitely not the result she wanted to see. What eternal damnation. This time the mercenaries came with great force. We have already backed down, but they still captured a few thousand of our tribesmen. Who knows how many horses and sheep they captured? Have they ever considered our feelings? Let me tell you, we have to fight this battle. Not only that, we have to raise the morale of our Mongol cavalry. Men, take the princess away and keep a close eye on her. Without my orders, she will not have any freedom. Suitor, who had already made his decision, would not allow anyone to interfere with him. Even if this person was his beloved daughter, it was still the same. The bodyguards outside the tent heard the Khan's order and walked into the tent. They looked at Tuaya with an innocent expression and said, "Princess, we are just following orders. Please don't make things difficult for us." After saying that, someone came forward to invite Tuaya to leave. "Father, you can't hit him or you'll regret it." Tuaya was taken away, but her voice still echoed in the air. "Don't bother about her. What does a girl know about important matters? How about this? Let's first discuss how to eliminate these 3,000 mercenaries." Suede forcefully banished his daughter's cries in his heart and continued to discuss military matters with the two generals. The Yinma River was less than 100 miles ahead. When the Nuzan cavalry had chased them all the way here, they naturally slowed down. As the commander, Yella had the ability to command. He also knew that it was not a good idea to go in alone. However, he still chose to follow so closely. He wanted to wait for the enemy to cross the river before attacking them halfway. He wanted to achieve victory to show the Nuzan cavalry's ferocity. Reporting, Commander, the 6th young master has given the order. He wants us to stay here and wait for the army to meet up. In the temporary military tent, as they were waiting for the news of the Mongol army crossing the river, a messenger came in and passed down Yang Chendong's order. Just as this messenger appeared, another scout that had been sent to the front also rushed back. Reporting, Commander, the Mongol army has begun to cross the river. It has begun? Ah. Yellow's face was filled with excitement. After chasing for more than 10 days, the opportunity had finally come. Yellow was still laughing when the vice commander, Lu Dai, suddenly said, "Commander, the 6th young master has just given the order." "Sai, what do you know? Haven't you heard that when a general is out there, he can't follow orders? Furthermore, although the 6th young master is strong, he is not at the front lines and does not know what is happening here. Naturally, he can't make the most accurate judgments." Yellow waved his hand casually. He had already received news that the 1st Cavalry Regiment behind them had already made their move. Not only had they stolen countless horses and sheep, they had also captured more than 5,000 people. This was a great achievement. He had been jealous of this for a long time. Now that he finally had a chance to show off, how could he give it up? Even with Yang Qindong's military order, Yi La still had the idea of fighting a war. Otherwise, what was the point of him trying so hard to become the commander of the vanguard? If he did not have a chance to show off, wouldn't he be letting down the word vanguard? Commander, but Lu Dai still wanted to say something. Yellow waved his hand impatiently and said, "All right, if you are afraid, I will leave you with a battalion of cavalry here to wait for the main forces." It was obvious that Yellow was angry. At this time, how could Lu Dai choose to stay? He nodded and said, "All right, then I will fight with Commander." "Aha, that's right. Men, go scout again. When you see the Mongolian vanguard crossing the river and boarding the rafts, report back immediately." Yella laughed heartily as though he could already see countless merits waiting for him. Lu Dai could no longer stop Yella from sending out his troops. After he left the tent, he called for a soldier and said, "Bring 2 horses and leave. You must inform the 6th young master immediately. Tell him that we are going to attack the Mongolian vanguard." "Yes." The man nodded, then turned and left quickly. Lu Dai looked at the departing figure and sighed, "Let's hope that Commander's decision this time is right." The Mongolian vanguard had already started to cross the Yinma River. Under the transport of the rafts, countless livestock and civilians crossed the river and left. However, what the outsiders did not know was that the Mongolian vanguard that had just been transported across the river had turned back. They quickly hid on both sides of the river. Due to the terrain, the scouts of the Jurchen Cavalry Regiment could only watch from afar and could not get close at all. This little trick was hidden from them. When he saw that there were only 5,000 to 6,000 enemies, the scout immediately turned around and reported the news to Commander Yella, who had already advanced 30 miles to the rear. After waiting for 10 hours, the opportunity finally appeared. Yella didn't want to wait a moment longer. She immediately gathered the troops and rode straight to the side of the Yinma River. In front of the river, Sud Khan and a few other generals did not leave. They had been waiting for the mercenaries to come closer. However, after 10 hours, most of the vanguard had left, but the enemy still had not appeared. They could not help but feel anxious. Don't tell me the mercenaries are trying to chase us to the north of the river? Don't tell me they have no intention of fighting? Why don't we charge back? No, once we charge back, the enemy will have too much time to retreat. We won't be able to catch up to them. With a distance of 30 li, everyone was riding on horses. No matter which side it was, it would be difficult to catch up to the other side. Amidst the discussions, Suder Khan's expression turned ugly. Could it be that the mercenaries were really that careful? If that's the case, I'm afraid there won't be a chance. Just as Sud Khan and the other generals were sighing at how timid the mercenaries were, a scout finally ran over and reported loudly, "Khan, the mercenaries have moved out. They are approaching us from 30 li away." "Oh. Ah, they're finally here?" As if he had won the lottery, Sud Khan laughed out loud. The enemy had finally taken the bait. Now it was time for him to perform well. "Pass down my orders, make preparations according to the previous plan." The various generals also left with excitement in their hearts, looking for their own troops that were lying in ambush, preparing to outflank and besiege the other party. Under the anticipation of everyone, the Nuzan cavalry finally appeared after more than 2 hours. When they were about 5 li away from the river, they saw more than 2,000 Mongols anxiously crossing the river on wooden rafts. "Aha, just in time," Yella said happily. The enemy had less than 3,000 people and they were running away in a hurry. They couldn't form any effective fighting force. If they rushed up now, they would be able to kill a lot. In this way, as the leader of the vanguard, he didn't disgrace his mission this time. "Attention everyone, charge with me, blow the bugle." Toot 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 toot, a loud bugle call sounded, and the 3,000 cavalrymen rapidly approached the side of the horse-drinking river. The sound of hooves landing on the ground caused clouds of smoke to rise. Under the setting sun, it was like a broken song of doomsday, blowing the bugle call of war. They're finally here. Everyone pay attention, get off the rafts and fight. Archers attack from afar. Everyone else, get on your horses and charge. Sud Khan, who couldn't wait any longer, smiled when he saw that the mercenaries had fallen for the trap. Only 3,000 people came. It was finally time for him to take revenge. The Mongol army methodically defended according to the previous plan. Many soldiers even got on their horses and flashed their sabers. This scene fell into the eyes of the vice-leader of the Nuzan cavalry, Lu Dai, who was getting closer and closer. He felt that something was wrong. Chapter 745. Leaders, something's not right. Look, the enemy isn't panicking at all. Instead, they seem to be prepared. Lu Dai's voice traveled into Yela's ears and he couldn't help but take a closer look. Although he had doubts in his heart, he still said fearlessly, "It's fine, we have 3,000 elite cavalrymen, and the enemy has less than 3,000 men. Even if we face them head-on, they won't be a match for us. Charge." The comparison of forces and the quality of the soldiers gave Yela unlimited courage and confidence. However, not long after he said that, the ground around them suddenly trembled. Following that, a large number of Mongolian cavalry appeared on their left and right. From afar, they seemed to cover the sky and the earth as if there was no end to them. Not good, we've fallen into a trap. The enemy has set up an ambush. Lu Dai quickly reacted to the situation. When he saw that there were around 10,000 Mongolian cavalrymen in front and to the side, he cried out in surprise. Yela's expression finally changed. He could naturally tell that this was the enemy's plan to surround them. However, it was too late to retreat now. He gritted his teeth and shouted, "Brothers, don't be afraid. We'll fight to the death. At most, we'll be heroes again after 18 years. Yes, don't be afraid. I've already sent someone to inform the 6th young master. I believe that reinforcements will arrive soon. That will be the time for us to obtain victory. Now, everyone listen to my orders. Use the 3-to-3 strategy to deal with the enemy. Don't kill the enemy, just protect yourselves first." Lu Dai's voice rang out, stabilizing the morale of the troops. "Did you send someone to inform the 6th young master?" Yela, who was at the side, asked with a suspicious look. "Yes, please forgive me for not asking for permission." Lu Dai replied. "It's fine. You did the right thing. Looks like the 6th young master is still the best. I shouldn't have disobeyed orders," Yela said with a face full of regret. At this moment it was useless to say anything. Facing an enemy that was 3 times their size, and the enemy was already prepared, the Nuzan cavalry began to struggle for a long time. At this moment, the 3-3 tactic played a key role. Every group of 3 cavalrymen formed a small group, leaving their backs and sides to their comrades as much as possible. This allowed them to face the enemy, kill the enemy, and wound them without worry. Facing the sudden encirclement, the mercenaries were actually able to remain calm. This was out of the expectations of the Mongol cavalry. But no matter what, since the battle had already begun, there was no reason to stop. Relying on the fact that they were already prepared and had a large number of people, they charged in from all directions. Soon the 2 sides were engaged in battle. The sounds of war horses neighing and the angry shouts of the cavalry rose and fell one after another. The sun was setting in the west and the sky was already turning red. Bright red blood flowed out in front of the horse-drinking river. Cavalrymen were constantly being cut down from their horses, and the sounds of howling and screaming were endless. Yela waved his saber and slashed at the Mongol cavalry one after another. After fighting for less than 2 hours, his entire body was already covered in blood. However, whether the blood was from his own body or from the enemy's body, he was already unable to distinguish. Now he only knew how to wield his saber mechanically. He only knew that when he saw someone who was not wearing a military uniform, he would wield his saber and slash at them. Under such desperate resistance, the last ray of the setting sun finally fell, and the sky began to turn dark. Once the sky turned dark, it was difficult for both sides to unleash their full strength. When they could not see the situation on the other side, the speed of their attacks became more careful. It was as if they were afraid that they would hurt their comrades if they were not careful. Using this opportunity, Yela could finally heave a sigh of relief. The continuous slashing just now seemed to have used up all the strength in his body. When he finally had a chance to rest, he felt that his right arm holding the saber had become very heavy. It was as if in the next moment he would not be able to raise it again. "Who is it?" Although he was very tired, he was still alert. When he felt that someone had appeared beside him, he instinctively slashed his saber. But it was immediately blocked. Then the familiar voice of the vice commander, Lu Dai, rang out. "Commander, it's me." "Lu Dai, haha, you're still alive. How are you?" When he heard Lu Dai's voice, Yella forced a smile. His face was filled with relief. "I'm fine. The soldiers and I fought according to the 3-to-3 strategy. There weren't too many casualties." As he spoke, Lu Dai had already come to Yella's side. When he got closer, he could finally see that there was a thick layer of blood on Yella's body. He could not help but ask softly, "Commander, are you injured?" "No, this is the blood of the enemy," Yella said proudly. But at the same time he knew that he had reached his limit. He might not be able to kill more than a few enemies before he was really injured and killed. Hearing that Yella was not injured, Lu Dai was relieved. He then looked around and said, "Commander, it's dark. The enemy can't attack, but they should be lighting up torches soon. If that's the case, I'm afraid our situation won't be too good." I know. Let's do this. Inform the soldiers to follow the Mongolian army. If they retreat, we will retreat too. Don't raise your torches. If you see someone with a torch, then he must be an enemy. Kill him." Yella nodded and gave the order to attack the enemy. Both sides were now in a mess. It was really you and me, you and me. There was no distinction between them. At this time, if anyone dared to light up a torch, they would be the first to be lit up. They would unavoidably become a target for everyone. "Yes, Commander." After Lu Dai agreed, he said to the few soldiers beside him, "Go and pass on the commander's order. If you don't see where our brothers are, shout. This way everyone can hear you." In the darkness, they stopped the Mongol army from killing people. At the same time, they also stopped the Nuzan cavalry from giving out orders. Fortunately, the voices could be heard clearly in the darkness. After a series of shouts, the soldiers quickly knew what was going to happen and how to deal with it. The shouts also reached the ears of the Mongol army. In fact, they already had people holding torches and preparing to light them up. After all, with torches they could differentiate between each other. They would know where to kill and who to kill. However, the shouts made some of the people who wanted to light up their torches hesitate. They were really afraid of becoming a target. However, there were still some people who did not believe in heresy. In the end, they still lit up their torches. The moment the light appeared, it was naturally very eye-catching in the darkness. When everyone looked towards the source of the light, there were also arrows that pierced through the air. There were even sounds of sabers being swung down the moment the flames appeared. Regardless of whether it was the archers attacking from afar or the sabers attacking from close range, there was only one result. All the Mongolian riders who lit up their torches became the target of everyone. They became the first targets to be attacked. Not only that, when the torches were lit up, even some of the cavalry who were illuminated by the light were killed on their horses. Most of them were Mongol cavalry. There were also a few Nuzan cavalry who were killed. "Bastard, I don't want torches. Don't light them up next to me. Otherwise, my saber is not to be trifled with." Seeing that not only the people who lit up their torches but also the people around them were about to be implicated, loud shouts rang out. These shouts were all from the Mongol cavalry. After all, everyone was afraid of death. Especially when they had the chance to win, no one wanted to die. The strategy of using torches to kill the enemy in the darkness failed. This was because everyone was too close. It was so close that the enemy could be 3 meters away from them. However, no one wanted to test it with their lives. No one wanted to gamble with their lives. This led to a strange phenomenon. They were clearly enemies and they were very close to each other. However, on this night they were actually living in peace. Everyone seemed to have reached a tacit understanding and were waiting for the arrival of dawn. They were all saving their strength. When the time came, it would be time for them to be at their wits' end. At the periphery of the battlefield, Swade's face was filled with despair and anger. He thought that with more than 10,000 cavalry, the most elite force by his side, it would be easy to deal with the 3,000 unprepared enemy cavalry who were surrounded by him. With just one charge, it would crush the enemy's fighting spirit. That would be the time to reap the fruits of victory. However, after fighting for more than 2 hours, not only did they not scare the enemy, but the sky had also darkened. Now they could not even light up their torches and could only wait for dawn. This made him feel depressed. Zamubala and Bao Yin's expressions were not any better. However, they did not have any better ideas. Other than waiting, it seemed that they could only wait. Of course, it was not completely impossible. For example, they could distribute bows and arrows to the battlefield. This way they could at least kill some mercenary cavalry. However, on the battlefield it seemed that they had more cavalry. If they really did that, it would only cause a greater mutiny. They thought of withdrawing their troops, but they were also worried that the mercenaries would turn around and escape. If that happened, they did not know if there would be any hope for them to chase after them. This would not work, that would not work. They could only wait helplessly. The night seemed to be very long and the waiting time seemed to be very torturous. 2 hours passed, then another 2 hours passed. After the sky darkened, it would be dawn. This was an iron law. Gradually, when a smear of white appeared in the distant sky, the sky also slowly brightened. With the arrival of dawn, the originally silent battlefield was suddenly filled with shouts of killing, and became lively again. Chapter 746. After a night of waiting, everyone felt like they were about to go crazy. Finally, they could see their opponents clearly and kill them with their swords. Everyone seemed to have used up all their strength. The clanging sounds were endless. After a night of hard work, the moment the two sides clashed, countless heads fell to the ground, countless riders fell off their horses, countless blood flowed and countless lives were ended. The sky was finally bright and the difference in strength between the two sides was clearly shown. Looking at the battlefield, there were only about 700 people left from the original 3,000 Nuzan cavalry. Almost all of them were injured and they all looked tired. On the other hand, the Mongolian cavalry from Mabe had lost even more men. Under the effect of the 3-3 strategy and the advantage of weapons like sabers, they had lost around 4,000 men. However, because of their advantage in numbers, they were still strong. Kill them all, don't leave a single one alive. Looking at the battlefield, the number of casualties on his side was even higher. Suter was sweating profusely. He finally witnessed the strength of the mercenaries. If he wasn't the one who ambushed them, it was highly doubtful that his 10,000 men would be able to defeat the 3,000 cavalrymen in a head-on clash. Suter Khan gave the order and all the Mongolian cavalry started the final charge with their advantage in numbers. Every Nuzan cavalry had to face at least 3 or 4 enemies. Luckily, the 3-3 strategy was still working. As long as their comrades didn't die, they didn't have to worry about their flanks. This allowed them to use their full strength and try their best to injure and kill their enemies. Even so, after a night of tension, the Nuzan cavalry had used up most of their strength. If this continued, it was only a matter of time before the whole cavalry was wiped out. Tong, tong tong. Tong 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 tong. The ground shook again and black figures started to appear in the distance. First it was 1, then 10, then 100, 1,000, when more and more black figures appeared, a bright 5-star flag fluttered in the wind. In the early morning it was very bright and dazzling. The reinforcements were finally here. After Yang Qindong gave the order for the vanguard to stop advancing, he felt that something was wrong. He was well aware of the combat power of the Nuzan cavalry regiment. It could be said that unless they used firearms like the 3 divisions of the Cold Front, no one would be a match for them if they only used cold weapons in a battle. He was satisfied with the strength of the Jurchen cavalry regiment, but at the same time he was slightly worried. The stronger a person was, the more arrogant they would be. Once the opportunity appeared, in order to perform better, they would most likely not listen to his orders. Yang Qindong was proud, but he was never arrogant. He had a good understanding of the generals under his command, especially the ones he had put in important positions. If he gave orders to Zhue Feng's reinforced first group or Lu Zhu's reinforced second group, they would unconditionally listen to his orders. However, this might not be the case for the Jurchen and Tatar cavalry. Because he was worried, Yang Qindong added another order, which was for the 3 divisions of the Cold Front to send a group to support them. It would be best if the Jurchen cavalry regiment listened to his orders, but if the situation changed, he had to think of a way to pull them back and try to stop them from moving ahead. In history, Ma Su was a smart person and was valued by Zhuge Liang. However, because of his arrogance, he lost his footing and caused the Shu army's plan to fail. Since there was a lesson in front of him, Yang Qindong had to be prepared. After receiving the order, the 3 divisions of the Cold Front personally led a group of fast horses and set off. They threw down all the heavy equipment and traveled light. While they were moving forward, they met the scouts sent by Deputy Commander Lu Dai and found out what the Nuzan cavalry was going to do next. As a result, their footsteps became even faster. They rushed all the way and finally arrived at the battlefield 10 hours after the battle had ended. At this time, the Jurchen cavalry regiment was basically crippled. The original 3,000 cavalry was only left with 600, and they had lost 4/5 of their forces. This was the Jurchen cavalry regiment. Their combat strength was really high, and they could even fight one-on-one with the scouts. If it was any other cavalry regiment, they would have been wiped out and would not have been able to hold on until now. However, after 10 hours, they still had to rely on the darkness of the night. At this moment, they were like an arrow at the end of its flight. Facing an army several times their size and the Mongol elites from Mabe who were prepared, they had already used up all their strength. Blow the charge horn. The first unit will be the vanguard, the second unit will attack from the left, the third unit will attack from the right, the fourth and fifth units will follow me as the middle to charge. Seeing that the battlefield was right in front of him, Commander Wu Sheng's eyes revealed a strong murderous aura. He was also very excited. The Jurchen cavalry regiment was not finished yet. This made him feel a sense of relief. At the same time, when he saw so many Mongol cavalry surrounding their allies, Wu Sheng was really angry. Did they think that they were easy to bully? Since they dared to set a trap for the mercenaries, then he would kill them until their parents could not recognize them. The first unit of the 3rd Cold Front Regiment rushed all the way here because they wanted to fight. The opportunity was right in front of them. From the regiment commander to the ordinary soldiers in every combat squad, everyone became excited at this moment. Even the soldiers in the catering squad had their eyes shining with excitement. The first to charge out was the 1st Regiment, 1st Unit, 1st Company Commander Tang Longtian. This was the former Jinzhou Left Guard Commander Qian Shi of Baiming. He was a Grade 4 martial officer, but during the Battle of Liao River in the New Urgan-Dusi region, he lost to the mercenaries and became a captive. However, a general was a general. Once he straightened out his attitude and thought things through, it did not take long for him to display a strong military talent and personal qualities. In the end, he obtained a high score in the military examination. After that, a few regiments passed him an olive branch, expressing their thoughts of taking him in as a member. Everyone else was fine as long as they had a unit, but Tang Longtian had so many choices that he was put in a difficult position. However, in the end he still decided to join the 3rd Division of the Cold Front. Even though he could only start as a normal soldier, unlike the other units where he was given the position of squad leader, vice squad leader, or even platoon leader, he still made the decision. In his opinion, since he was going to join the mercenaries, he would choose the strongest unit to join. Gold would always shine. After Tang Longtian joined the 3rd Cold Front Regiment, he was assigned to the 1st Regiment. His performance was outstanding and he was promoted as an exception. In the end, he was promoted to the position of 1st Company Commander. Now he was the vanguard of the vanguard, leading the 1st Company Commander and charging forward. The sudden appearance of the 5-star flag and the sound of the bugle horn were like a tonic that flowed into the hearts of Yella and the other 600 Nuzan cavalry soldiers. When they turned around and saw a large group of mercenaries charging from afar, many of them actually had tears in their eyes. This was the benefit of being an organization. Although it was free to do things alone, but once they met with danger they could only face it alone. If they could not survive, then only death awaited them. With an organization it was completely different. Just like what was happening now, the mercenaries had sent reinforcements. This meant that they would not have to die. Not only that, they could hold off the Mongol cavalry and perhaps even turn the situation around. Yella was able to become a regiment commander not only because of his bravery, but also because he was quick-witted. He immediately shouted, "Don't retreat anymore. Keep the enemy occupied and buy time for the main force to arrive." The 600 cavalry soldiers in the regiment all roared in agreement. Then, they changed their attitude of retreating and suddenly launched a ferocious attack on the middle of the Mongol army. Potential was something that was hard to predict. Usually, one could unleash several times their strength. Everything depended on the situation and the atmosphere. Now, the Jurchen cavalry regiment was able to display their potential and suddenly became lively and lively. Correspondingly, the Mongol cavalry panicked. They had originally thought that the enemy would definitely be defeated, and that they only needed to chase after them like a dog that had fallen into the water. Who would have thought that the enemy would have reinforcements? The moment the sun rose, before they could unleash their full strength, the enemy had appeared. The Mongol cavalry, who were already shocked by the Nuzan cavalry's stubbornness, had already lost their will to fight. After all, anyone would instinctively want to hide as far away as possible when facing a dying person who was looking for someone to fight for their life. Now, not only was the Nuzan cavalry fighting to the death, there was also a mercenary army. How were they going to fight this battle? Many of the Mongol cavalry who had their own plans started to retreat. They tried their best to stay away from the Nuzan cavalry to save their own lives. The Mongol cavalry retreated and avoided them. This was equivalent to opening up a path for the Nuzan cavalry, giving them more chances to reach the middle of the army and threaten the enemy commander. One could imagine what kind of scene it would be if they were entangled with the mercenaries and the main force of the mercenaries came to kill them. Sud Khan was also shocked by this scene. He did not expect the mercenary reinforcements to arrive so quickly. He knew that he did not have much time left. He turned around and looked at the Inma River. Seeing that the wooden rafts were ready, he immediately made a wrong decision. Retreat, retreat with me. As long as we retreat to the other side of the river, they will not be able to do anything. Was it right to retreat? Chapter 747. Of course it was not a mistake. It was just that the timing was not right. He could have arranged for a group of cavalry to block the charge of the Nuzan cavalry and retreat. However, the Sutta, whose life was in danger, was afraid and made a wrong decision. He did not leave anyone behind to defend against the enemy. Instead, to save his own life, he was the first to dismount and lead his horse onto the wooden raft. This caused the Mongolian cavalry, whose morale was shaken, to lose their morale and become chaotic. Along with Sudur Khan getting on the wooden raft, the other Mongol cavalry saw that the situation was not good and did not hold back. They all got off their horses and charged onto the wooden raft. At that moment they finally had a chance to show off their nimble and agile skills. All of them risked their lives to get on the wooden raft and retreat. Along with them were his generals Zamubala and Bao-in. Since even the Khan wanted to escape, why would they be so foolish as to bring their men to block the enemy? They were the same as everyone else, they only had one life. The commander and a few other generals were the first to escape. After the wooden raft was filled, they quickly rowed towards the center of the river, leaving behind many Mongol cavalry who did not get on the wooden raft. All of them were anxious. Seeing the Nuzan cavalry charge right in front of them, they could only brace themselves and charge up. They could not retreat and could only fight. This was a choice that they had no other choice. However, such a choice was something that they had no choice but to do. They were destined to lose their morale and fighting spirit. They were destined to be a pile of loose sand and would definitely fail. Commander Yella used the last of his strength to lead Deputy Commander Lu Dai and the other 600 warriors to wave their blades and kill the Mongol cavalry who were already panicking and afraid. Under this kind of attack, the enemies were quickly scattered in all directions. The number of soldiers was many times their number, but without the orders of their general they could only dodge and hide. They could not display their original strength. Tang Longtian arrived. As the vanguard of the vanguard, the moment the order was given, he led the first company to charge to the front. When they were less than 50 meters away from the first batch of Mongol cavalry, the warriors of the first company raised their right arms and took out their steel crossbows. 7 consecutive shots lit up, and arrows shot forward effortlessly. They hit the Mongolian cavaliers who were caught off guard and were still in a state of panic. In just a short encounter, dozens of enemies were killed. However, this was just the beginning. The 7 consecutive shots continued to display its advantage. Under the rapid firing of arrow after arrow, the Mongolian cavalrymen who were thrown into disarray were shot down from their horses and lost their ability to fight. In this battle, Tang Longtian could be said to have killed to his heart's content. Facing the Mongol army that had lost all morale and were only focused on escaping, forgetting that they still had bows and arrows on their backs and could retaliate, the Mongol army actually quickly fired out all 7 consecutive shots, killing over 300 of their enemies in the process. This was equivalent to unleashing more than 300% of his combat strength. This was a great contribution. Overjoyed, Tang Longtian put away his 7 consecutive shots and shouted to his subordinates, "Draw your swords, kill the enemy, it's time to make contributions." Kill. The 100 warriors who did not lose any of their men shouted loudly and cooperated with him. Then they followed behind their company commander and stabbed into the chaotic Mongolian cavaliers like a needle. Tang Longtian was charging forward with all his might, showing that he wanted to meet up with the Nuzan cavalry. Behind him, the commander of the 1st Battalion, Guofeng, led the other 3 companies and rushed over. Another wave of 7 consecutive shots heavily injured the Mongol cavalry, greatly reducing the enemy's strength and achieving the goal of heavily injuring the enemy and breaking their hearts. The 2nd and 3rd battalions followed the orders and attacked from the left and right, forcing the Mongol cavalry who were running away in all directions back to the main formation. Then Division Commander Wuxia led the 4th and 5th battalions to charge forward, giving the Mongol cavalry another heavy blow, causing them to feel as if they had nothing left to live for. In the middle of the Inma River, the wooden raft was still crossing the river. Cold sweat flowed down Khan Sud's forehead uncontrollably. He was afraid and angry. When he saw his soldiers on the riverbank facing the charge of the mercenaries, they were unable to fight back at all. When they were either dead or injured, his heart was bleeding. However, he was also glad that he was fast enough to escape into the river. Otherwise he might really be in danger. However, he did not think that if he did not escape immediately and waited for battle, he might have a chance to bring more soldiers across the river. After all, the reinforcements this time were only a regiment of about 2,000 men. Moreover, one of the battalions was a reserve battalion. Their combat strength was not as strong as the other battalions. This was also why the 3 cold front regiments only had 5,200 men. However, it was too late to say anything now. He had already retreated, and no matter what, he would not go back. All he could do was pray in his heart and hope that his soldiers could rely on their own strength to escape. In fact, there were indeed some Mongol cavalry who were skilled in riding and had quick thinking who escaped. After all, they had the advantage in numbers. However, there were very few of them. During this battle, even though the 1st Regiment of the 3 Cold Vanguard Divisions did not use the 95 style they carried on their backs because they wanted to increase their accuracy when they fought on horseback, the 7 consecutive shots in their hands were still quite useful. The waves of arrows destroyed the courage of the Mongolian cavaliers, and there were less than 1,000 enemies who truly dared to flee at this moment. There were more than 600 people on the rafts, but 1,000 of them escaped. The rest were either killed, injured, or captured. The 10,000 Mongol army was killed by the Nuzan cavalry and the 3rd Cold Front Division. Around 6,000 people were injured and 1,500 people were captured. The war was finally over. As the wooden raft crossed the middle of the Inma River, it disappeared behind the other side. The Mongol cavalry who were still alive made a smart choice. They dismounted and surrendered. At this time, Wuxia came to the side of Commander Yella and Deputy Commander Lu Dai. "How are you guys? Do you need a medic to treat your injuries?" "We're fine. Even if we're injured, it's just that we don't have any strength left." Yella smiled bitterly and shook his head to reject the medic Wuxia sent. Although they had won the battle, their losses were also huge. Moreover, these losses were caused by his disobedience to military orders and making the wrong decision. This caused his expression to become unsightly. Yella did not even know what to do next. How could he face the 6th young master as a criminal? As if he could see that Yella was not in a good mood, Wuxia patted him on the shoulder and said, "Okay, don't think too much. The 6th young master is wise. You have to believe in this." The reason why Wuxia was so nice to Yella when he disobeyed orders was naturally because of the bravery he displayed. The 3,000 Nuzan cavalry actually fought the 10,000 Mongol cavalry for an entire night and even heavily injured them. This kind of result was not bad even in the 3rd Cold Front Division. Since they could fight, they should be respected. Wuxia's words seemed to give Yella some confidence. At the very least, he forced a smile on his face. "Thank you, Teacher Wu. No need to thank me. It's all because of your performance that I admire." Wuxia nodded gently and then said to the correspondent beside him, "Immediately send someone to report this matter to the 6th young master. At the same time, send someone to the nearby forest to find wood and get a carriage. I think the comrades of the Jurchen Cavalry Regiment are tired. Let them get on the carriage and have a good rest." The smoke of the battle gradually dissipated and the river drinking horse returned to silence. Wuxia, who had chased away the Sud, did not intend to pursue. Firstly, he did not have a ready-made wooden raft. If he wanted to rush, he would need time. Who knew where the enemy would escape during this time? Secondly, with the experience of Yella's Nuzan cavalry, if he forced his way across the river and the Mongol cavalry was waiting for him on the other side, wouldn't he be sending himself to be attacked? One was in the river and the other was on the shore. There was not much of an advantage. He didn't give the order to pursue and instead turned back. This indeed made the plan of Sud Khan, who was waiting on the other side of the Inma River, fail. Just as he crossed the river, another general under him, Nader Isong, also brought 20,000 cavalry over. He then formed an encirclement and waited for the mercenaries to appear. However, after waiting for a long time and not seeing anyone, the Sud Khan sent a wooden raft across the river. Only then did he know that the mercenaries had already retreated. "Khan, let's chase. They only have 2,000 people and most of them are tired. They can't be our match." Nader Isong, who had not seen the strength of the mercenaries, suggested. How could the Sud Khan not want to turn the tables? However, thinking about the stubbornness of the mercenaries and the possibility of reinforcements appearing at any time, he shook his head and said, "Forget it. Let them be. Anyways, as long as they can't cross the river drinking horse, we will be safe. Our tribe will also be safe." The Sud Khan was really scared after being beaten. 2 battles in a row and 2 defeats. One of them was when he had the advantage in numbers and his plan had succeeded. However, he still could not take down the enemy. He really did not know how he could defeat the mercenaries. He was afraid and even had a shadow in his heart. This was the result that Yang Qindong wanted. He did not expect to completely destroy the Mongol army in this battle. The enemy had 600,000 soldiers and soldiers. Such an opponent was not something that he could defeat with his current strength. He did not have such a big appetite. Beating the enemy until they were afraid and did not dare to find trouble with him was the main goal of this battle. Now it seemed that the strategy had been achieved. Just from this point alone, it was worth it to send out troops. Chapter 748. Wuxia retreated and soon met up with the main force of the Cold Front Division. Then the army retreated and finally met up with Yang Qindong's army. At this time Yi La and Lu Dai, who had been resting in the carriage, also regained their energy. As soon as they returned to the camp, the 2 of them knelt in front of the 6th young master's tent and didn't get up for a long time. Yang Qindong listened carefully to Wuxia's report and learned about some details of the battlefield and the bravery of the Nuzan cavalry. 6th young master, these Nuzan cavalrymen are really good. If it were us cold vanguard warriors who didn't use guns, I'm afraid that they would be able to do the same. They are really good, so... Wuxia stuttered, which attracted Yang Qindong's attention. What are you trying to say? Wuxia's heart skipped a beat when Yang Qindong looked at him. Although he was now the commander of the Cold Front Division and was a high-ranking officer in the army, he was still a primary school student in front of Yang Qindong. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that Yang Qindong only needed to say one word to make him lose everything. Therefore, when facing Yang Qindong, Wuxia did not dare to have the slightest bit of arrogance and pride. Seeing that Wuxia didn't speak, Yang Qindong snorted and said, "You want to plead for them, right?" "Yes, I want to plead on their behalf." Wuxia straightened his body and puffed out his chest as much as he could as he spoke. "Okay, then you can go out and kneel." This time, Yang Qindong didn't even raise his head and said this casually. Wuxia was stunned when he heard this. He didn't seem to have heard it clearly and had a puzzled look on his face. Then Beta Persei's loud voice rang out. "Don't you want to plead for them? Then go out and kneel. Isn't it clear?" Oh, I know," Wuxia said as if he had just realized something. He didn't forget to give a standard military salute before leaving the tent and kneeling outside. "Okay, you've become smarter." Now that there was no one else in the tent, Yang Qindong raised his head and glanced at Beta Persei. The other party actually understood the meaning of his words. It seemed that Beta Persei, who had followed him, was no longer a martial artist. He had also learned to use his wisdom. After being praised by Yang Qindong, Beta Persei showed an embarrassed smile, and then flattered, "Even a stone will be enlightened if you follow young master every day." Haha, that's a good analogy. Yang Qindong laughed heartily. He was also considering how to deal with Yella. Logically speaking, if he disobeyed a military order, he would definitely be severely punished. The lightest punishment would be demotion, the heaviest punishment would be to have him retire from active service, or even to be charged with a crime. However, he had won the battle and showed his capable side. There weren't many of such generals even in the mercenary army. It would be a great loss to not let him lead the troops. He had to be punished even if he was guilty. Otherwise, if the other officers followed suit, wouldn't it be a mess? For a moment, Yang Qindong couldn't openly go easy on him. At this moment, Wuxia stood up and gave him a hint to solve the problem. In this way, he let the other party go out and beg for mercy. In this way, the law couldn't punish the masses and he had a way out. Most importantly, after this incident, the officers below could be more united. Could be said to be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Outside the tent, Wuxia, who was wearing the rank of senior colonel and wearing a white cloak, came out and knelt on the ground, level with Yella and Lu Dai. This scene shocked the 2 of them so much that their eyes widened. Lu Dai was even more puzzled and asked, "Commander Wu, didn't you make a meritorious service? Why are you kneeling here with us?" This was also the question Yella wanted to ask. Wuxia shook his head and said with a bitter smile, "I'm pleading for mercy on your behalf. Although you disobeyed orders in this battle, under the circumstances, if I was the one leading the troops, I'm afraid I would have made the same choice." He said that he was pleading for mercy on their behalf, and that he would have made the same choice. When Yi La and Lu Dai heard this, the 2 of them couldn't help but shed tears of joy. It was as if they had found a confidant, as if they had found a family member who understood them the most. They cried and were emotional. Wu Sheng's actions also made Yella and Lu Dai feel warmth. Although it was true that they were prisoners of war and had some other thoughts in their hearts, Wu Sheng's actions completely suppressed the last bit of small thoughts in their hearts, letting them know what the warmth of a family was like. Not long after Wu Sheng knelt on the ground, the political commissar of the 3 divisions, Qin Bo, arrived. Seeing the scene in front of him, he only pondered for a moment before kneeling on the ground with a plop. He didn't say much, but the intention to plead for mercy was very obvious. After Qin Bo, the 3rd commander of the 3 divisions, Chunyang, and the 1st commander of the reinforced cavalry, Zhui Feng, also rushed over and knelt in front of the tent. Their appearance became a spectacle that all the soldiers in the army could see and discuss. The commander of the Tatar cavalry, Su He, naturally knew about this matter very quickly. Hassan, who came to report, saw Su He's frown and said, "Commander, I think you should also kneel and plead for the commander and vice-commander of the Nuzan cavalry." "What?" Su He asked in confusion. "Commander, think about it. Everyone is going. If you don't go, wouldn't you be an exception? You will be ostracized. We are also new here. It's better not to do something that will offend people." Hassan said anxiously. He didn't understand. When it came to planning on the battlefield, Su He's ability was indeed not bad. Even the 6th young master acknowledged this point. Otherwise, he wouldn't have become the commander of the Tatar cavalry. But when it came to interpersonal relationships, this Su He was a little lacking. As a subordinate, Hassan saw this point and felt that it was necessary for him to remind him. "Everyone is going, so do I have to go? I'm not familiar with Yi La and Lu Dai, let alone have a personal relationship with them. Besides, this time they were punished because they disobeyed orders. Why should I plead for them? Isn't this supporting the people under me to disobey orders? I'm not going." Shaking his head firmly, Su He added, "Let's go. If we have the time, let's go down and see the army and urge them to hurry up with their training." Su He's stubbornness made Hassan shake his head. But he was the commander. Since he had made a decision, how could he, a small company commander, question it at will? With a long sigh, he followed the commander to the temporary training ground. Outside Yang Qindong's tent, except for the commander of the Tatar cavalry, Su He, the other officers of the regiment and above rushed over to plead for Yi La and Lu Dai. This kind of scene naturally made the 2 Jurchen generals feel touched and grateful. In the tent, Beta Persei walked in and whispered in Yang Qindong's ear, "Young master, Commander Su He went to the training ground to supervise the soldiers under him." "Well, you did a good job." Yang Qindong nodded with satisfaction. He had expected that Su He did not come to plead for mercy. Since there was no friendship between them and he thought that Yi La and Lu Dai's approach was wrong, why would he plead for them? Wasn't this to embarrass the 6th young master? I told you that Su He is reasonable." Yang Qindong smiled and looked at Beta Persei, who was standing aside with an embarrassed expression. Just now, Beta Persei said that he was afraid that all the officers of the regiment and above would come forward to plead for mercy. Yang Qindong denied it. He asserted that others might, but Su He would not. For this reason, the 2 of them made a bet that whoever lost would do 500 push-ups. Although Beta Persei did not dare to let Yang Qindong fulfill his promise even if he won, it was enough to comfort his soul. But he did not expect that he would still lose the bet. Seeing that Yang Qindong was staring at him, Beta Persei could only put his hands on the ground and began to complete the bet. Yang Qindong continued to close his eyes and rest, forgetting about the officers kneeling on the ground outside. Since he wanted to plead for mercy, he should look like he was pleading for mercy. By the time Yang Er was done with the 500 push-ups, the sky was about to turn dark. The master and servant walked out of the tent at a leisurely pace. They didn't even look at the people kneeling outside as they rushed straight to the place where they had their meal. Yang Qindong didn't pay attention to the crowd. Yi La, whose legs were already sore from kneeling, said with a bitter expression, "Everyone, I and Deputy Commander Lu appreciate your kind intentions, but you should go back. If there's any crime, we brothers will take responsibility for it. I was the one who disobeyed the military order in the first place, so any punishment is only right." "That's right. You guys should go back. It's time for dinner." Vice Captain Lu Dai also spoke up. Wu Sheng and the others did not seem to hear the words of the 2. They were still kneeling there with their heads raised, their gazes firm and resolute. They seemed to have determined their actions from the moment they knelt down. They would not get up unless there was a result. Looking at this scene, Yi La and Lu Dai were very excited. At the same time, they were constantly reflecting in their hearts. If there was a chance, they must perform better in the future. Yang Qindong and Beta Persei came back after dinner, but they still did not look at the people kneeling on the ground. Instead they returned to the tent. Just like this, time passed by little until the sky was completely dark. It was time to rest and sleep. Under the supervision of the battalion-level officers, each of the military camps entered the tent to rest. Outside the main tent, several regimental commanders were still kneeling on the ground. They did not get up, nor were there any orders for them to get up. The lights-out signal resounded throughout the entire military camp. Except for the temporary medical team who still had candlelight and the wounded who could not sleep due to the pain, the entire military camp entered a state of silence. At this time there was finally movement from the main tent. Beta Persei walked out. "Come in all of you. The young master wants to see you." Chapter 749. Yes. Wu Sheng and the others hurriedly responded. Then one by one they supported their numb legs and walked into the tent. The tent was already lit with candles, making it extremely bright. Yang Qindong was reading an ancient book in his hands. He waited for Wu Sheng and the others to enter the tent one by one before he slowly raised his head. His cold gaze swept across everyone's faces. Everyone who was stared at by Yang Qindong could not help but lower their heads, as if they had done something wrong. Just when everyone was feeling uneasy and did not know how the sixth young master would deal with them, Yang Qindong finally spoke. "It's already late at night and the soldiers are already asleep. What does this mean?" Faced with this sudden question, everyone was stunned. They were at a loss and did not know how to answer. Wu Sheng's face was filled with confusion at first. Then he turned his head and his gaze fell on Political Commissar Qin Bo, wanting an answer. However, at this time Qin Bo was also confused. He did not understand why the sixth young master would ask such a question. Even Qin Bo did not know, let alone the others. Everyone was stunned and did not know how to answer. All of this was seen clearly by Yang Qindong. Then his voice sounded again. "This means that with or without you the army will still exist. What should be done will be done." Everyone suddenly understood, and then their faces turned red. They finally understood the sixth young master's meaning. There were indeed arrogant people among them who thought that it was because of them that the soldiers under them were so obedient and could win the war. However, now that Yang Qindong said this, they were surprised to find that without them, the soldiers under them were still very orderly. In that case, wouldn't their role become very small? The reason why Yang Qindong chose to meet them after they fell asleep was to warn them in this way. Don't think that things will fall into chaos just because the army left. Facts have proven that the earth will continue to spin even without anyone, even without Yang Qindong. Yang Qindong sighed and said, "Facts have proven that it wasn't you who made these adorable warriors, but these adorable warriors who made you. So please put away your arrogance and think more about the warriors on the battlefield in the future. Sometimes, a wrong decision can cost them their lives. Do you understand?" "Yes, sixth young master, we understand." Everyone answered in unison. This was not a perfunctory reply, but a genuine sense of regret in his heart. Everyone looked regretful. Yila and Lu Dai knelt on the ground again and said, "Sixth young master, we were wrong. We thought too highly of ourselves and didn't care about the safety of our brothers." "You were wrong. Because of your wrong decision, many Jurchen elites died. This is a lesson that not only you but everyone else must remember." "Yes, we will remember." Wu Sheng, Qin Bo, and the others answered as if they had benefited greatly. It was obvious that this sentence came from the bottom of their hearts. Yang Qindong was very satisfied in his heart, but he still said with an unforgiving look, "Since you did something wrong, you should be prepared to be punished. Yila, Lu Dai, the two of you disobeyed military orders and made mistakes in command. Each of you will be recorded with a major demerit and your salary will be deducted for half a year. If there is a next time, you will be expelled from the army. Do you have any objections?" Hearing that they could continue to lead troops, Yila and Lu Dai did not dare to have any objections. They nodded and promised that there would not be a next time. "As for the others, each of you will be recorded with a demerit and your salary will be deducted for half a year. Do you have any objections?" Wu Sheng and the others did not expect that when they came to plead for leniency, they would also be punished. They did not care about the salary for half a year. As long as they made contributions, they would be able to receive shiny silver. This was much more than their salary. But since it was Yang Qindong's order, no one dared to object. They all nodded in agreement. They did not know that the reason why he was so strict and even punished those who pleaded for leniency was because Yang Qindong did not want this to happen a second time. Otherwise, once someone made a mistake, the others would also plead for leniency. Wouldn't that be a mess? How would he be able to lead troops into battle? The matter was finally resolved. Wu Sheng and the others returned to the barracks exhausted. Yang Qindong put down the ancient book in his hand and came to the sand table in the tent. He looked around and pointed to Su Yunxing, the commander of the reconnaissance battalion, and asked, "Are there any Mongolian tribesmen around here?" "There should be some, but they are all individual households. There is only one or a few households within a few hundred miles. We really can't let the army stay here." Su Yunxing understood the meaning of the sixth young master and immediately gave an answer. "Well, there is not much food in the barracks. It will be enough to eat mutton every day. Inform everyone to prepare early tomorrow morning. After lunch, the army will set off and retreat to the first city." Yang Qindong nodded and gave the order to withdraw the army. After a total of 24 days, Yang Qindong finally returned to the first city with the army. It was different from the previous trip. This time, there were countless horses and sheep, as well as nearly 10,000 Mongolian tribesmen following the army. As soon as these people entered the city, they were handed over to the city lord, Yumian. Yang Qindong himself went straight to the wasteland that had been reclaimed. There is strength in numbers. The words of the great ancestor were true. With the efforts of Yumian and the joint efforts of the soldiers who stayed behind in the city, 2,000 acres of wasteland had been reclaimed outside the first city in just over 20 days. Looking at the flat ground and the straight trenches, Yang Qindong was very satisfied. Not bad, we can consider planting in a greenhouse." The weather on the grassland was colder than inland. It was not an exaggeration to say that the weather here was cold for half of the 12 months of the year. This also led to the fact that in such a climate, there was only one season of crops. The natural climate factors made the lives of the people who were still dependent on food difficult. It was something that was difficult to change. But because of the arrival of Yang Qindong, this was destined to change. Planting vegetables in a greenhouse was the first reform that he wanted to carry out. Whether it was an army or a country, it was fine. If they wanted stability, they must first be able to fill their stomachs. Otherwise, if they couldn't even eat, who would work with them and risk their lives together? There was a saying that went, "If there is a difficulty, you have to do it. If there is no difficulty, you have to create difficulties." What Yang Qindong wanted to do was to solve the difficulties together. Looking at the flat ground, Yang Qindong had enough confidence in his heart. He had sent a telegram to Cheking City before he went to the Mongol tribe in the north, asking them to make greenhouse tubes and plastic films according to his requirements. If he wanted to produce these things, it might be a problem in other places, but in Cheking City they had already been invented and used in Cheking City. The technology was already mature. Once these things and seeds arrived, they could be built. 3 months later, when winter came, they should be able to eat fresh vegetables. This must be considered a pioneering work. Yang Qindong returned with the army. Not only that, but he also brought back a lot of captives. Just from this point of view, the Mongol army in the north should have been defeated. The mercenaries had defeated Agar Dorji and Sud Khan, which made them famous in this grassland. No one dared to look down on them and no one dared to have any ideas about them. Just as everyone was thinking that autumn was about to pass and winter was about to arrive, the mercenaries should also become obedient. Suddenly, everyone realized that the 2,000 acres of land that had just been reclaimed outside the beginning city had suddenly become lively. People who knew the climate here knew that this season was not suitable for planting any crops. Let's not talk about whether you could guarantee to protect the fruits of victory. In this kind of weather, everything would freeze to death. This was not allowed by the heavens. Who could go against the heavens? And at this time, the mercenaries actually wanted to do this against the heavens. How could it not surprise and amaze people? When the other forces nearby heard this news, their first thought was that the mercenaries were crazy. They would do a useless thing that would cost them a lot of money, but in the end they would not gain anything. However, on the land outside the beginning city, Yumian did not think so. When he was in Jilin city, there were already greenhouse vegetables. However, because the climate there was not bad, there were no problems with crops for 2 seasons a year. Even if there were greenhouses, there were not many people who used greenhouses. However, it was not that there were none. On the contrary, he had gone to see it. Later, when he heard Yang Qindong say that he could try to plant greenhouses here, he felt that his mind was suddenly enlightened. He immediately sent a telegram to his father, Yu Qian, asking him for help to send more old farmers who had planted greenhouses to help the beginning city. Of course, Yu Qian would pay attention to his son's request for help. In addition, this was originally the intention of the 6th young master. Not long after, the first batch of 100 old farmers who had planted greenhouses came to the beginning city by boat with all kinds of materials. Then they started to plant greenhouses here. It was only September and the weather was still good. The greenhouses were only buried and vaguely formed. There was no plastic film covering them. Therefore, in the eyes of the locals, this move was a manifestation of the mercenaries' craziness. Knowledge could change one's fate in life. At that time, no one realized what kind of harvest the mercenaries would have 3 months later. You have to pay attention to the temperature when planting vegetables in the greenhouses. The plastic film is too thin. If the temperature outside is too low, the vegetables inside might freeze to death. You also have to pay attention to insect and pest prevention. Chapter 750. We have to solve the problem of ventilation and sunlight. Once it snows heavily, we have to clean it up in time. Not only can we let the sunlight shine, but we can't let the heavy snow collapse the greenhouse. Yang Qindong introduced his experience to Yu Mian and the 100 old farmers. Although these old farmers were veterans in planting crops, the climate in Crimson City was different from that of the first city. He still had to list out the things to take note of one by one. Yu Mian and the old farmers listened with shining eyes. They had nothing but admiration for Yang Qindong. This sixth young master acted as if there was nothing that he didn't know. Anything that was placed in front of him was no longer a problem. Yang Qindong left the matter of planting in the greenhouse to Yu Mian and these experienced old farmers. Instead, he turned around and focused his energy on military training. As mentioned before, the weather in the grasslands would be cold for nearly half a year. How could the army get used to fighting in the cold weather? This was the focus of military training. Send a message to Crimson City and ask them to make more military cotton coats and light down jackets. Tell them that the quality must be good. If anyone dares to use inferior cotton to make up the numbers, they will bring their heads to see me. Yang Qindong said to Beta Persei, who was following beside him. He still remembered that such a thing had happened to the National Army. In the cold weather, the soldiers wore cotton-padded clothes made of cotton without cotton and inferior black cotton. In the end, who knew how many people had frozen to death and frostbite? Such a mistake could never happen to him. If anyone dared to do so, they would be waiting to die. Inform Crimson City to make some hot water belts. Make sure that everyone has one. Didn't I tell them that the frostbite cream I gave them last time was already developed? Then mass produce it. All the anti-cold items should also be prepared. Yang Qindong listed out a bunch of items. This was what it meant to prepare for a rainy day. Opportunities were always given to those who were prepared, and you had to be prepared. In the first city, preparations were also being made to welcome the arrival of winter. One after another, fireplaces were built by Wu Hua and the other blacksmiths, and installed in the homes of the common people. What was worth being happy about was that Yang Qindong also found an underground coal mine not far from the first city according to his memory. Once he had this thing, it would not be difficult to keep warm in winter. At that time, the people here would go through their first warm winter together. It would be a very pleasant and joyful thing. Datong Military Headquarters. As Bai Ming's first line of defense against Walla's army, Commander Sun Hong felt a lot of pressure. He had sent letters to Bai Ming's capital 5 times to request for reinforcements. While complaining about the bad situation, he also requested the imperial court to send reinforcements. On the surface, they were constantly writing memorials asking for help, but in their hearts, they were cursing Shi Heng's nephew Shi Biao's 8 generations of ancestors. If it weren't for this person's insatiable greed, which eventually disrupted the cooperation between Bai Ming's business group and Walla, how could the border be tense and the flames of war be raging? When he thought that the Walla's army led by Yes Hen had occupied the Hetao area and could attack Datong's mansion at any time, Sun Hong couldn't help but have an impulse to pull out his sword and kill people. It was just that now Shi Heng was deeply trusted by Zhu Qiu. He had changed from Wuqing Count to Wuqing Marquis, and at the same time, he was also the commander of Bai Ming. He was in charge of all the military affairs and was already Sun Hong's superior. This suddenly made Sun Hong feel a sense of powerlessness. And just when Hetao had become Walla's possession and it seemed that Datong's mansion would face a war at any time and might even be lost at any time, the other party suddenly stopped. The domineering Walla suddenly became so honest, which was naturally beyond Sun Hong's expectation. At first, he suspected that the other party was preparing for a war, or even preparing to transfer more Walla cavalry to participate in the war. But when he sent out all the scouts, the news he received was the opposite. Not only did Yes Hen not increase the troops in the direction of Datong, but he sent a part of the cavalry to defend the Mongolian area in the northeast. Could it be that something happened on the grassland again? Or was Tuachuo Buhua making a comeback? Sun Hong was naturally clear about the matter of Yes Hen cooperating with Agar Dorji to deal with Tuachuo Buhua. It was precisely because he was clear that he thought so. Therefore he sent out some scouts to further places to gather information. More than 2 months after this person was sent out, he finally returned with news. The answer turned out to be that the Duke of Loyalty suddenly appeared on the grassland and built a first city. He continuously fought with Agar Dorji and Mabe Mongol and won both. Sun Hong was originally the deputy chief of Datong and had always been guarding the border. He had only heard of the Duke of Loyalty but had never met him. But he had heard a lot about his glorious achievements. He also knew that although this person was young, his talent in business was amazing, especially when it came to leading troops to war. He was actually outstanding among people. Previously, when Baiming's capital was in danger, it was he who brought a few mercenaries and some people from the capital's 5 cities warden's office to defeat the powerful Walla cavalry. Later, he also made Yes Hen give in, and the two sides had business relations, which bought a lot of time for Baiming's development. Later there was a rebellion in the south of the southern Ming dynasty, and it was this Duke of Loyalty who not only stopped and eliminated the rebellion, but also took down 2 small countries, Jiaoji and Lancang, and established a province there. This action was clearly to establish the power of an independent country. It was said that this action made many officials in the court furious. Many memorials were sent, but in the end, it was like a stone sinking into the sea. Regarding this, Sun Hong could understand. After all, Jiaoji and Lancang were too far away from Baiming. If they wanted to send troops to eliminate them, they would have to pass through the southern Ming dynasty. How could Zhu Qiyu agree? Not to mention, even if they did send troops, it was still unknown whether they could defeat the mercenaries. The turmoil in the south made Baiming feel like it was sitting on pins and needles, but there was nothing it could do. It had to be said that this Duke of Loyalty was amazing. However, he did not expect that he would suddenly appear in the grasslands again. In such a short period of time he had made such a big name there. No one dared to underestimate him. Of course, after understanding and knowing all this, Sun Hong was still somewhat happy. He was only a chief of the Datong army. Although he controlled the military power of 50,000 soldiers, he was still a martial artist. It was difficult for him to enter the eyes of those sage-like officials in the court. In his eyes, there was only the 3 acres of land in front of him. As long as Datong was safe, it was equivalent to him completing his duty. The appearance of the Duke of Loyalty could intimidate Wallace troops, which was beneficial to him. This was enough. Sun Hong was happy, but such important news still needed to be reported to the court. He immediately wrote a memorial and sent it to Baiming's capital. Not long after, Baiming also sent a decree. The decree was directly sent to Sun Hong and the guarding eunuch Zhang Quan. Zhang Quan was a eunuch. During the coup of Tumu, the previous guarding eunuch, Guijing, died in battle. He was sent here to replace him. Compared to Sun Hong, this person had a close relationship with many eunuchs in Baiming's capital. If one had to say that he had a relationship with the higher-ups, Sun Hong was probably more than one level lower. When the decree was issued, the general idea was for Sun Hong and Zhang Quan to find a way to contact the Duke of Loyalty and ask him to contribute to Baiming's border chaos. If possible, they should even hand over the origin city to the great Ming dynasty's army. They should even hand over the military power of the mercenaries there. After reading the emperor's decree, Sun Hong and Zhang Quan both shook their heads. Who was the Duke of Loyalty? How could he be so easy to get along with? Did they really think that he was an ordinary official of the great Ming dynasty? Just based on the fact that he was able to defeat Agar Dorji's 50,000 cavalry and force the Mongol cavalry to cross the Yinma River, just based on these 2 points, how could they be willing to submit to others? Just based on the fact that the Datong government only had 50,000 soldiers, how could they make the other party bow their heads, let alone make them hand over their military power? Sun Hong did not have a better idea, and Zhang Quan also had the same idea. The scholars of the Ming dynasty were very united, and the important officials would sometimes work together for their own interests, often forcing the emperor to give in. Under such circumstances, the development of the eunuchs was inevitable. In order to maintain the balance, both Zhu Qizhen and Zhu Qiyu chose the same method, which was to promote and use the eunuchs to suppress the development of the scholars. Under such circumstances, the authority of the eunuchs became more and more important, to the point where few officials dared to not give them face. Even in the Great Tong Prefecture, Sun Hong still had to look at the face of the eunuch Zhang Quan. Eunuchs were a great threat to ordinary officials, but there were also exceptions. For example, the Duke of Loyalty Yang Chendong was the most typical example. It was said that when he first became the Duke of Loyalty, any eunuch who dared to call himself the Duke would be dealt with by Yang Chendong, the real Duke. After that, the eunuch group could not do anything to him. Just based on this point, Zhang Quan's power was not in the eyes of the other party at all. Sun Hong sighed and so did Zhang Quan. Both of them had a sad look on their faces, but since the emperor had given the decree, they had to complete it. In the end, after thinking about it, Zhang Quan decided to go to Shi City. He wanted to see the situation there with his own eyes, so he could give an explanation to the higher-ups. Sun Hong was naturally happy that Zhang Quan was willing to go. He immediately decided to send Chenhu Su Dei and his men to escort him all the way to ensure his safety. Immediately, a cavalry team of more than 1,000 people left Great Tong and went all the way to the northeast. Zhang Quan came. Whether it was to find out the truth or to find out the truth, Yang Chendong did not care too much for the time being. One of the main reasons why Shi City had to be built was to shock the Beiming imperial court. Chapter 751. The establishment of Vietnam and Laos was indirectly tantamount to a falling out with Beiming and southern Ming. Anyone with a clear head could see his ambition. They just didn't want to act rashly because of the strength he had shown. In the eyes of others, this was enough to be proud of, but in Yang Chendong's eyes, it was far from enough. He didn't forget that there were still 2 madams in Beiming's capital. Back then they were there to be hostages so that the emperor of Beiming, Zhu Qiu, wouldn't suspect him. Moreover, his brothers and sisters were all in the capital of the northern Ming dynasty. Normally he couldn't see the existence of these people, but if he really did tear off all pretense of cordiality, they might become his weak points. The Security Bureau had already sent a message. Whether it was the immortal abode in the capital, the residences of his brothers and sisters in heaven beyond heaven, or even the Yang family manor 15 li south of the city, the embroidered uniform guard spies could often be seen. They were watching these people to send a message to Yang Chendong. Don't go too far. Otherwise these family members could be in trouble at any time. With these embroidered uniform guards watching, Yang Chendong couldn't send all his family members out of Beiming's capital at the same time. For the safety of his family members and to give Beiming enough deterrence, Yang Chendong chose to build a city in the northeast of Beiming, which was the origin city. This place wasn't like the south of southern Ming, where there were countries big and small for him to conquer and form enough influence. Since this was the case, he would build a new city here and have a force to threaten Beiming's imperial court so that they wouldn't dare to do anything to his family members. The establishment of the origin city didn't go against Yang Chendong's original intention when he came here. Its construction and existence had effectively deterred Wara. According to the Security Bureau, Yeshen had become much more well-behaved. After occupying the Hatao region, he did not launch an attack on Datong Prefecture. He had achieved his initial strategic goal, which was to maintain the balance between Beiming and the grassland tribes. Now, what he needed to do was to make the first city even more powerful so that no one or any force would dare to have any ideas about it. As long as the origin city existed for a day, it would form a great deterrence to all the surrounding forces. As time passed, this deterrence would achieve the goal of subduing the enemy without fighting. At least, it would be much easier to deal with than before. This was a relationship that complemented each other. The development of the first city had become the most important thing in Yang Chendong's eyes. Of course, building and developing the first city was only the first step. Next, Yang Chendong needed to do more things such as continue to expand his territory and influence. In order to achieve the huge goal of the Han people walking at the top of the world in the future, whether it was Beiming or southern Ming, Yang Chendong had no intention of conquering by force now. It was even possible that he would have to avoid large-scale attacks in the future. However, when it came to the land outside of northern Ming, he didn't have so many concerns. The problem was, if he wanted to expand, who should he choose as his next military target? After thinking about it, Yang Chendong's gaze fell on the northeast, on the land of Russia ruled by the Golden Horde. The Golden Horde was one of the few remaining Golden Horde families with the purest bloodline in the Mongolian forces. If he could take them down, whether it was to expand his power or to deter them, it would be of great significance. Think about it, even the Golden Horde of Mongolia was defeated by the mercenaries. In a psychological sense, wouldn't the mercenaries be invincible? There was another important reason that made Yang Chendong make this decision. After more than 200 years of development, The current Golden Horde was no longer as strong as before. Now was the time to go downhill. According to the development of history, even if he didn't make a move, the Golden Horde would be destroyed by the rising power of Russia in less than 20 years. Since that was the case, there was nothing to worry about. Taking advantage of the situation was the best time to take action. In order to achieve the goal of severely injuring or even destroying the Golden Horde, Yang Qindong had already begun to formally consider which army would set off from the first city for the expedition. Logically speaking, the best person to lead an expedition was himself. In his previous life, he had been there countless times in order to complete missions, so he was very familiar with the language there. He also had a better grasp of some of the situation and terrain there compared to others. However, the first city had just been built and hadn't experienced the test of a cold winter. He was really worried about going far away now. In addition, the expeditionary army had just set off and had to travel thousands of miles to fight the enemy. It would take a long time to achieve success. Even if he went now, he might not be able to achieve success immediately. It was better to send other troops first. They could explore the path and also take the opportunity to find the shortcomings of the army. But even if he sent troops facing a huge monster like the Golden Horde, the strength of the troops sent was not enough. It would just be a joke. After thinking about it, Yang Qindong decided to send the 3 divisions of the Cold Front to the front line. The 3 divisions of the Cold Front mainly used the 95 style. They also had the steel crossbow, which was a sharp weapon in close combat. The individual quality of the soldiers was also very good. They were Yang Qindong's trump card in the north. In addition, the division commander Wu Sheng and the political commissar Qin Bo had been working together for a long time. The strengths and advantages of the two could complement each other. It was enough to ensure that they would calmly deal with problems under any circumstances and would not be rash. No matter how one looked at it, they were the most suitable candidates to be sent to battle. Of course, the 3 divisions of the Cold Front were not enough. There was also the Nuzan Cavalry Division. In addition, the number of troops reached 10,000. Only then would they be able to deal with the encirclement and siege of some large armies. The reason why he sent the Nuzan Cavalry Division and not other cavalry divisions was because of the Golden Horde. That was because the so-called Mongol Golden family brought a lot of pressure to the Mongol army. However, when facing the priestess, the pressure would be reduced to the minimum. On the contrary, because of the many years of suppression, the two sides were like fire and water. Only by sending the Nuzan Cavalry Division would they be able to unleash more combat power. To them, this could be considered a battle of revenge. How could they not use their full strength? After making the decision, Yang Qindong began to personally train the 3 divisions of the Cold Front and the Nuzan Cavalry Division. In particular, he gave some advanced guidance on how to fight in cold weather and heavy snow. He even took out the skis. The skis that he made himself were put to use at the end of October, the beginning of November, when the first snow fell on the plains. Yang Qindong stepped on the skis and walked on the snow. His light posture and extreme speed stunned everyone. First, there was the appearance of the bicycle. The 6th young master was the one who rode it the fastest. Next, the skis were invented and demonstrated by the 6th young master. This made everyone respect Yang Qindong even more. In their hearts, they wanted to ask, was there anything in this world that their 6th young master could not do? In the land of ice and snow, with skis the army could move faster. Not only that, when another batch of supplies arrived, many white cloaks appeared. Yang Qindong put them on, and his entire person seemed to blend into the white snow in an instant. These cloaks were not as big and eye-catching as the cloaks worn by officers above the regiment level. However, they could be used to hide one's figure and were the best disguise. If the enemy did not keep an eye on them and did not have information beforehand, they would not be able to see them even if they slipped under their noses. Alright, you have the equipment. You can train with it now. When you are done training and the army departs, I, the young master, will personally send you off. Yang Qindong patted Wu Sheng, Qin Bo and the others on the shoulders before turning around and walking out of the training ground. Wu Sheng and Qin Bo were both very excited about Yang Qindong's favor and the fact that they were allowed to lead their troops into battle alone. Speaking of which, from the 3rd Regiment to the 3rd Division of the Cold Front, they had always been by Yang Qindong's side. Rather than saying that they had won every battle, it was more accurate to say that it was the 6th young master's good command and battle plans. Now the fledglings could finally fly freely in the sky. How could the two of them not be excited? This did not mean that they did not want to be under Yang Qindong's command anymore. It was just that they wanted to prove their abilities. There was already news that the Cold Front was considering forming an army. It was very likely that the first army would be built in the rear headquarters, Chichen City. The first commander would also be Lung Song, the former commander of the 1st Division. Since they were going to form an army, both Wu Sheng and Qin Bo would not be limited to the position of a division commander and political commissar. They also wanted to take a step forward and become a commander from a division commander. In order to achieve this goal, they would need to put in more effort and gain more military merits. Only when they were free to command in battle would they be able to unleash their full potential. In order to achieve this goal, Yang Qindong had just left the training ground when Wu Sheng's voice rang out. Train hard, train as hard as you can. Try to familiarize yourself with using skis as soon as possible and make a name for yourself. Yang Qindong did not need to worry about the enthusiasm of the army's training. Not long after leaving the training ground, he arrived at the greenhouse base. More than 2 months had passed. When it was first built, it was still early autumn. But now it was already early winter. When the surroundings were covered by snow, the vegetable greenhouse base was indeed a scene of exuberant green. It was said that no matter how busy city Lord Yumian was, he would take the time to come here and take a look. It was as if his mood would become very good after seeing it. Yang Qindong would also come here every few days to see the results of his guidance. With the addition of 100 experienced farmers and some technical guidance from Yang Qindong, the green greenhouse base was developing smoothly. The moment they entered, their eyes were filled with green, giving them a feeling of joy of a harvest. Chapter 752. 6th Young Master. We've calculated. In about half a month, some of the vegetables will be ripe and ready to be served on the table. When the experienced old farmer who stayed here saw Yang Qindong come to inspect again, he said as if he was showing off his merit. He good. Yang Qindong nodded in satisfaction. Looking at the patches of green in front of him, he was as happy as looking at piles of gold. It was not an exaggeration to say that the value of green vegetables in this place was not much different from gold. At this time in the past, other than the mutton that the people of the grassland ate all year round, most of the vegetables that were buried deep in the cellar, such as radishes and cabbages. Of course, because of Yang Qindong's appearance, there was now an additional potato. But no matter what, with only these few vegetables being exchanged, there would be a time when people would get tired of eating them. Now that these various varieties of green vegetables could be taken out, there was no need to worry about the sales even if they were sold at a high price. The only thing to consider was the lack of ingredients and the lack of supply. Unknowingly, Yumian also appeared in the greenhouse base with a face full of excitement. When he saw that Yang Qindong was also here, he almost jogged all the way over. 6th Young Master, you're really amazing. Don't flatter me. Yang Qindong smiled at Yumian. This is not flattery, these are sincere words. If you don't believe me, you can go to the city and listen to what the people in the city say. They all see you as a god, as someone sent by Changtian. Yumian's words were not exaggerated. After seeing the progress of the greenhouse base, he deliberately arranged for 100 people in the city to enter the greenhouse base to observe every day. It was the appearance of these 100 people every day that turned their surprise into excitement. Then, under the word of mouth, the appearance of the greenhouse base as well as Yang Qindong, who was the mastermind, began to be infinitely exaggerated. Until now, many people outside had said that Yang Qindong was someone sent by the everlasting heaven to help them. As a direct result, more and more commoners joined the first city, reaching nearly 50,000 people. To be able to grow from nothing to nearly 50,000 people in the grasslands in just 3 or 4 months was not as simple as it seemed. It was truly a miracle, an unprecedented feat. There weren't many people on the prairie to begin with, and each of them had their own tribes. It wasn't easy to gather everyone together. Even if you had a powerful armed force, it would be difficult to do so. After all, everyone lived far apart. No matter how powerful you were, you could always hide if you couldn't beat them. But now, these people came to the first city of their own accord. The streets in the city were so spacious, neat and hygienic. When they walked into the house, it was cold outside, but the room was as warm as spring after the fireplace was burning. The greenhouse was green as if it was midsummer. The cavalry outside the city was full of fighting spirit, and their morale was like a song. The major restaurants in the city had opened, and sometimes, they could see some programs that praised the grassland people's strength to face life and the mercenary army's bravery to kill the enemy. All of these really injected a warm current into the cold weather, and it went straight into people's hearts, making everyone really like this place. 6th Young Master, you're right to transfer some of the female soldiers from Chichin City. It's funny that I opposed it before. afraid that these young and beautiful female soldiers would appear here and cause some chaos. Now, it seems that I didn't see the big picture enough and didn't observe things clearly enough. Whenever they performed, the restaurant would be filled to the brim. This was especially true for the newly built Immortal Abode, which was the largest restaurant in the city. Whenever the female soldiers performed, it would be even more difficult to get a seat. Thus, they had to pay quite a bit of business tax to the origin city. This made him, as the city lord, even more confident in doing things. Yumian sighed with emotion. Well, you're right about this. The construction of spiritual civilization is also an indispensable part of people's lives. What is happiness? It's not as simple as having enough to eat and clothes to wear. It should be more reasonable and have higher goals. Yang Qindong nodded and said a few words that made Yumian feel as if he had obtained a treasure. Yumian kept nodding and even took out a pen and paper from his body as if he was performing magic. When he saw that Yang Qindong seemed to have finished speaking, he asked for instructions again. Sixth young master, it's winter now and most of the people don't have anything to do. Especially after seeing the prosperity of the city, they feel that their pockets are flat and embarrassed. Some of the young and strong people are asking to join the army even louder. They have people blocking the entrance of the city lord's mansion every day. What should we do? After everything in the first city was on the right track, Yang Qindong gave the newly built city lord's mansion to Yumian for his office, changing the original city lord's mansion to the Yang mansion. The people respected Yang Qindong and didn't dare to find trouble with Yang Qindong. However, when they went to the city lord's mansion, they didn't feel any burden. Sometimes, when he wanted to go out of the mansion to do things, he had to go through the side door or the back door. Listening to Yumian complaining, Yang Qindong nodded after hesitating for a while. With so many young and strong people having nothing to do, it was inevitable that there would be various problems after a long time. At this time, the first city must not be in chaos. Such a good situation couldn't be changed by internal chaos. How about this? We can consider recruiting. The 3 divisions of the Lung Feng Division and the Nuzhen Cavalry Regiment will soon go to the north. The first city's military strength will become empty. Appropriate recruitment can also make up for our own shortcomings. However, even if we recruit, we can't use all of them. Consider setting up 3 new divisions first. I will arrange for Tiger's Mane to do the specific things. You just need to post the notice and let the people in the city know. By the way, there should be many women in the city who have nothing to do, right? Yes. When Yumian heard that they could recruit, he was overjoyed. When he heard Yang Qindong ask about the women at home, he felt that there must be something behind it. He immediately said, usually at this time they can graze in the place they choose. However, when they enter the first city they sell their livestock to us. A very small number of them are kept together and implement the common grazing policy. Now more and more women are idle at home. It will be a hidden danger after a long time. Set up a textile bureau and let these women make clothes. I will send a telegram to the Red City and ask them to send the raw materials over. Also send some experienced weavers. Although the money won't be much, it should be enough to support the family. We can also consider recruiting some young, beautiful and versatile Mongolian women to join the propaganda team in the city. I have heard that Mongolian women are very good at dancing. Also, some programs are performed by the Mongolians themselves. It is more unique and easier to convince people. After coming up with so many ideas, Yumian wrote them down one by one in his notebook. Then he hurriedly left the greenhouse base. He wanted to implement these things immediately. He believed that the people in the city would be very happy. This would also be of great help to him, the city lord, to stabilize the situation in the city. Yumian moved very quickly. Not long after he returned to the city lord's mansion, the notice was written and posted at the gate. This news quickly spread throughout the city. Many people were excited and encouraged by it. In a row of newly built houses in the east of the city, a pair of young men had just heard the news and were excited. Child, what's wrong? Could it be that the messenger of immortal heaven brought some pioneering work? How can you be happy? The person who spoke was a middle-aged woman. From her appearance, it could be seen that she must be an extremely beautiful person when she was young. At this time, wrinkles had begun to appear on her face. However, her eyes were still bright and full of spirit. With her facial features, she gave people a very amiable feeling. This woman's name was Ba Dama. In Chinese it meant lotus. When she was young she was a famous beauty. Later on she married a very brave man and gave birth to a daughter, Kikij, and a son, Ba Tuesday. Originally, this was a happy family of 4. When Batu was old enough, he could sell some of his sheep and horses to raise money for his son to marry a wife. However, there was an unexpected storm. During one of their herding, a group of 4 scouts under Wala Yeshen accidentally came to their door. They took a fancy to the young and beautiful Kikij and wanted to kidnap her. At the crucial moment, as the head of the family, Batu's father stood up. He held a rusty cavalry sword and fought with the enemy. Using this opportunity, Ba Dama brought her children and escaped on horseback. Batu's father killed 1 enemy and injured 2 others. In the end, the cavalry sword in his hand broke and he died of exhaustion. The horses and sheep in the family were also swept away. When Ba Dama brought her children back to the herding land, only her father's body was left. The happy family became a tragedy. After losing their sheep and horses, Ba Dama left her hometown with her underage son and daughter. They walked and stopped all the way and even had to eat. In the end, they heard about the matter in the first city and came here to settle down. At this time, it had been 3 years since his father was killed. Batu had grown up into a young man. Kikij was very beautiful and outstanding. However, after 3 years of running, the old mother, Ba Dama, finally collapsed from exhaustion. If Kikij and Batu had not gone to the mercenary hospital in the city to ask for help, her mother would not have been able to hold on until now. The matter of Batu's family was seen by some neighbors who also came to the first city to make a living and yearned for a new life. Those who had money and those who had things gave them a lot of help. There was even a wealthy Mongolian family who wanted to marry Kikij as a concubine and took out 200 taels of silver as a betrothal gift. However, he was directly rejected by Ba Dama. In her words, her children were eagles and jade rabbits on the grassland. They should not lower their heads for anything. They could earn everything with their own hands. Chapter 753. Was easy to say. The marriage was rejected because Ba Dama wanted to find a better family for her children. However, the hard days had to continue. As the only man in the family, Batu went out early every morning to dig coal. It was this move that allowed the family to barely survive in the first city. However, with the arrival of winter, many things in the city had to stop. The work of digging coal was not as easy as before. They wanted to find another way, but how difficult was it to find a job? Batu even tried to work as a waiter in some restaurants. However, because he was tall and strong, it was useless. The reason given was that the waiter in the restaurant was too powerful and would easily scare the customers. Days passed. If this continued, the family would not be able to supply the coal. Even the last warm place would be lost. What's more, they would not be able to afford the rent and would probably be kicked out of the first city, the City of Hope. Suddenly, a recruitment notice was posted outside the city lord's mansion, as well as the recruitment of 200 young and beautiful girls and the textile bureau in the city. Finally, the city recruited soldiers. This made Batu see hope in despair. How could he not be happy? Sister Kikij also heard about the establishment of the textile bureau. She was also very excited. She could support the family with her hands and earn money to treat her mother's illness. This family should be getting better and better. No. Sister, you shouldn't go to the textile bureau. Instead, you should go to the publicity team. Do you still remember that father praised your beautiful dancing more than once? When he heard that his sister was going to the textile bureau to sign up, Batu immediately stopped her. Can I do it? Kikij said with some lack of confidence. You can do it. At this moment, not only Batu but even her mother, Ba Dama, said at the same time. Ba Dama looked at her daughter with the loving and kind eyes of a mother and said, Kikij Batu, you are in a good era. You can do it. You can. Your father's spirit in heaven will bless you. The confident eyes of her mother and brother made Kikij have an idea. She gathered her courage and said, well, I will give it a try. If it really doesn't work, I will go to the textile bureau to find a job. Kikij didn't have much confidence. Even though she was very beautiful, she didn't dare to have any hope for anything lucky. However, happiness suddenly fell on her head, making her feel as if she hadn't woken up yet. There weren't many people signing up for the publicity office in the city. Perhaps there were too many people like Kikij who didn't have confidence in themselves. This allowed her to gain quite a bit of advantage. With her appearance, she stood out among the line of people waiting to be assessed. Reality proved that her luck wasn't bad. She caught the eye of the head of the propaganda department, Shui Qing. Shui Qing was originally a female official in Crimson Nest City's Inchuan department and was highly valued by the department head, Wan Xiaoyu. This time, when he learned that it was the 6th young master who had personally given the order, he immediately sent out his trusted subordinate. Reality proved that Shui Qing didn't disappoint. After coming to the beginning city, she quickly understood what had happened here. Then, she chose some of the most representative stories and arranged them into a program. Once it was performed, there were a lot of good reviews. It also gave the publicity office a good start. All the work quickly entered the right path. The degree of popularity was unexpectedly good. There were more and more people in the army and among the common people who wanted to watch their program. However, the manpower in the publicity office was limited. Just when Shui Qing was thinking about whether to ask for support from the headquarters in Crimson Nest City, the sixth young master spoke. He gave them the authority to recruit 200 people to join the publicity office. This was equivalent to solving her problem. In order to complete this task well and not let down the sixth young master, Shui Qing personally acted as the examiner and recruited these 200 people. With Kikij's beautiful appearance and her good dancing foundation that she had learned from her mother since she was young, she was chosen by Shui Qing and became a new member of the publicity office. When she found out that she had been chosen and that she would be able to receive a salary of 10 taels of silver every month, and that if she performed well, there would be even more rewards, Kikij was so happy that she shed tears. She turned around and ran out. She wanted to tell this good news to her mother and brother and share it with the family. Perhaps it was because Kikij was too happy that she ran too fast. When she rushed out of the door, she didn't look at anyone or anything and bumped into a man's embrace. She couldn't help but let out a delicate cry. This wasn't because Kikij was too weak and delicate. It was because his chest was too broad and too sturdy. It was like a wall, making her feel as if a meat bump had grown on her head. "What's wrong with you? Don't you look at the road when you're running?" A reprimanding voice sounded. The one who spoke was one of the strong man's followers. "I'm sorry. I was too anxious. I apologize." Kikij also knew that it was because she was too anxious and reckless that she bumped into someone, even though she might be the one who was injured. But the past few years of experience had made her used to swallowing her anger. As she spoke, in order to show her respect, Kikij took the initiative to raise her head when she said, "I apologize." This allowed her to see the person she bumped into. This person was about 1.9 meters tall and weighed about 200 kilograms. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was as tall as a horse. But as soon as she raised her head, Kikij immediately lowered her head, as if she didn't have the courage to look at him. She could only see the rough outline of the other party, but when she raised her head, the other party saw her clearly. So beautiful. This was the only thought in the tall man's heart. Although this woman's looks aren't as good as the other madams, she's much better than the others. Especially with her tear-stained face, it's easy for people to feel pity for her. Beta Persei, who was standing there, couldn't help but think in his heart. The person who came was Beta Persei. Yang Chendong considered that today was the recruitment day of the publicity department and wondered if anyone would come here to cause trouble. After all, there were only girls here and it wouldn't be good if they were scared. Thus, he sent Beta Persei over to take a look. With this person here, no one would dare to cause trouble here. Unexpectedly, as soon as Beta Persei arrived, Kikij bumped into him. His skin was rough and his flesh was thick, so of course nothing happened to him. But Kikij actually cried, which made Beta Persei feel a little embarrassed. After apologizing, Kikij didn't hear Beta Persei's response and wanted to leave. Anyway, she had already apologized. The other party was a man, so he wouldn't make things difficult for her. It was said that snatching beauties often happened in other places, but it had never been heard of in the first city, which was ruled by law. This was also the reason why her mother dared to firmly reject the neighbor who wanted to take her as a concubine. Kikij wanted to leave, and her feet involuntarily walked to the side. However, an outstretched arm blocked her. The person who stopped her was none other than Beta Persei. When he saw the other party crying, he thought that he was the one who caused it, so he wanted to apologize. What are you doing? If you continue like this, I'm going to shout for help." A big hand blocked her way, scaring Kikij so much that her whole body was about to shrink into a ball. She was already thinking about whether she should return to the publicity department. She remembered that Director Shui Qing seemed to have a good impression of her. I'm fine. I just want to ask why you're crying. Did I cause it? Well, I've been practicing martial arts all year round, so my body is a little too strong. I must have hurt you." Beta Persei faced Kikij and said incoherently. He didn't know how long it had been since he felt this way. Even when facing Yang Chendong, Beta Persei could answer smoothly most of the time and smile as usual. But for some reason, facing a strange girl today, he actually felt a little flustered. "I'm fine. Can you please move aside?" After Kikich heard Beta Persei's words, she knew that he was not a bad person. But that was all. She still had urgent things to do, such as going home to report the good news. Oh. Beta Persei heard that Kikich was fine, so he put his hands down. But before the other party was about to walk past him, he suddenly straightened his arms and said, "Miss, my name is Beta Persei. If you feel unwell or have other troubles, you can come to the Yang Mansion to find me. I can do my best to help." Yang Mansion? When she heard this name, Kikich finally couldn't help but raise her head again. There was no one in the beginning city who didn't know where the Yang Mansion was. It was the place where the great Ming dynasty's Duke of Loyalty and the Messenger of Tingri Heaven stayed. Those who could live there gave people a sense of mystery. She didn't expect this man to stay there. Kikich raised her head again, and Beta Persei saw her clearly again. "Beautiful, you're beautiful." This was Beta Persei's second impression. Kikich seemed to feel that Beta Persei's gaze was a little hot, so she lowered her head again. "Thank you for your concern. I'm fine. Can I leave now?" "Oh yes. Beta Persei really had no reason to stop the other party, so he had to take a step back and make enough space for Kikich to trot past him. Kikich had already left, but Beta Persei's gaze was still following her. When the figure could no longer be seen, Captain Dao Zhao's voice sounded beside him. "Brother Beta Persei, she's gone. If you like, I'll send my brothers to follow her and see where she lives." "What's her name?" "Oh, forget it." Being teased by his brothers, Beta Persei couldn't help but blush. He then shook his head and strode into the door of the publicity office. Although he didn't send anyone to inquire about Kikich, Beta Persei still paid attention to it because he found that the girl's figure always appeared in his mind from time to time, and he couldn't let it go. Fortunately, he didn't forget what the mission was this time. He quickly entered the publicity office and came to the recruitment site. Chapter 754. As soon as he entered, his bulky figure quickly attracted the attention of many people. Director Shui Qing also saw Beta Persei at the first moment and hurriedly came over to greet him. This was the person beside the sixth young master, and he was also a popular person. He absolutely could not be offended. "Brother Beta Persei, why do you have time to inspect our small yamen?" Shui Qing walked over with a smile on her face. Originally, she wanted to call Beta Persei master just like how the people in Crimson City called Jianghu. However, after someone called Beta Persei that way, he was scolded. What a joke, the sixth young master was only a duke, how dare they call him master? For this matter, he personally sent a telegram to Jianghu in Crimson City, severely criticizing him. Jianghu was also somewhat wronged. He did not request to be called Master Jianghu, but the people below took the initiative to call him Master Yang. However, even with Beta Persei's angry reprimand, Jianghu also asked everyone in Crimson City to call him Jianghu in the future. If not, they could call him Brother Jianghu. Anyway, Master Jianghu was not allowed. Whoever called him that could only be punished. After seeing Shui Qing, Beta Persei also asked with a smile on his face with concern, "How is it? Is everything normal here? Did anyone come to make trouble?" "Why would anyone come to make trouble? This is the beginning city. Are the patrols that can be seen casually on the streets useless?" Shui Qing pursed her lips and chuckled. Beta Persei also chuckled. The safety of the beginning city had always been the most important. Even if it had begun to snow, the security and defense of the city was still the same as usual. Every 10 minutes or so, a patrol of at least 10 people would appear on the streets. Not only that, the streets in the city had always been very clean. Even if the heavy snow was still falling, the snow that had covered the ground a moment ago would be swept out in the next moment. This showed how frequent the patrols were. The beginning city was surrounded by grasslands and was surrounded by Mongolians. The slightest carelessness might cause unknown things to happen. In order to achieve a deterrent effect, the patrols on the streets were more frequent. "By the way, how's the recruitment today? How many good seedlings are there?" Beta Persei didn't dwell on the issue of public security. Instead, he asked about the recruitment of the publicity department. Shui Qing knew that this was probably the sixth young master's intention. He wanted to find out more about them, so she answered truthfully, "The situation isn't too good. Although there are quite a lot of people here, most of them aren't in good condition, especially their skin. Perhaps it's because of the climate and environment, most of them are too rough and dark. I'm not discriminating against them, but since they're performing for everyone, they should at least look pleasing to the eyes. It's better to avoid those who don't look interesting at first glance. After saying this, Shui Qing made a gesture of touching her forehead. Well, after being busy for more than an hour, we only found 3 good seedlings. After saying this, she handed a roster to Beta Persei. Due to their relationship with Yang Qindong, the people of Yangxia were more used to using hours instead of hours when talking about time. However, they only found 3 suitable people in more than an hour. This was indeed a lot of pressure for the publicity department that had to recruit 200 students. Beta Persei pretended not to care and took a look at the roster. The name of the last of the 3 recruited people, Kikij, came into his eyes. Chichiga, that's a nice name. He still asked as if he didn't know anything about it. It had to be said that after being by Yang Qindong's side for a long time, Yang Heir had learned to do things in a roundabout way. He had also learned some methods. If it was in the past, he might have directly asked questions. Yes. Speaking of Kikij, Shui Qing seemed to be very interested. I don't know how this girl takes care of herself. Her skin is good and she has a good dancing foundation. She's a talent that our publicity department urgently needs. You haven't seen her, but even if she wore the most simple clothes, you can still see that she's a delicate flower. Shui Qing said unintentionally, or rather she said it as if she was showing off. When Tiger's Mane heard everything, he was even more certain that the girl he saw should be Kikij. This was because when he entered the big house, he observed that there were many girls who came and they were all dressed in colorful clothes. He thought that on such an occasion, they would wear the most beautiful clothes and leave the best first impression for others. Kikij did not wear any colorful clothes. Perhaps it was because of her personality, or perhaps that was the best she had. Unfortunately, Kikij was too happy. After knowing that she was chosen, she left in a hurry and did not even leave an address. This made Beta Persei unable to find out more even if he wanted to. Of course, with his identity, it was not impossible for him to find someone in the beginning city based on his name. However, that would be too much of a waste of manpower and material resources. Beta Persei did not want to be special. He thought that since this girl would come to work in the publicity department as long as he had the heart, would he be afraid that he would not have the opportunity to see her? Beta Persei was still thinking about the next opportunity to meet Kikij when Kikij returned home in high spirits. However, as soon as she entered the room, she saw her brother, Batu, squatting on the ground and her mother, Batama, comforting him. Batu, don't think too much. The mercenaries are doing this for your own good. Who asked you to have no brothers in the family? This is also for our family's sake. Batama said earnestly and reached out to stroke Batu's hair. She was undoubtedly a loving mother. What's going on? Kikij, who had a premonition, looked at her mother and brother and asked as she walked forward. Sister, they don't want me. They said that I'm the only son in the family. When Batu heard his sister's voice, he quickly raised his head. When he looked at Kikij, his eyes were full of grievances. If Batu's performance was not good enough and his physical fitness was not strong enough, it might still be sad, but it was also difficult for Batu to accept. However, he passed the basic physical fitness assessment and even got a good result in his equestrian performance. However, when they finally investigated his family situation and learned that he was the only son, they directly rejected him. According to the mercenary examiner, it was too dangerous for the only son to go to the battlefield. They could not use the future of a family as an excuse. Logically speaking, these words were really for the sake of these Mongolian youths. The mercenaries didn't want to end the bloodline of these youths. After all, anything could happen on the battlefield, and the enemy wouldn't take extra care of you just because you were the only child of your clan. However, the situation of Batu's family needed to be changed urgently, especially his mother's illness. He had to find a way to treat it as soon as possible. If he could not join the army, what else could he do? Not to mention that he did not earn much from doing manual labor. It was already early winter. What else could he do? Batu was a filial child. He was anxious to rely on his own efforts to change his family. In his opinion, this was what an indomitable man should do. Kikij was also shocked by this statement. Her brother woke up very early today, even earlier than her sister who had to wake up to make breakfast. His eagerness to join the army was already very obvious. She originally thought that her brother was tall and strong. He would definitely be a good seedling if he joined the army. However, she did not expect that he would be rejected with such a reason. This was really unexpected. How about little brother not join the army? I have already been chosen to join the publicity department. In the future, I will have a salary of 10 taels of silver a month. Our family situation will slowly change. The originally good news, now that it came out of Kikij's mouth, it did not seem that surprising anymore. Sister, have you been chosen? That's great. Batu, who was still squatting on the ground, was pleasantly surprised when he heard the news. However, he quickly lowered his head again. His sister could do things for the family, but he, a 7-feet-tall man, could not do anything. This seemed to reflect his incompetence. Hearing that his daughter was chosen by the publicity department, Badama was also very happy. Good, I knew my daughter was the best. There's no problem. In any case, there was still good news. Badama actually said that he wanted to borrow some food from the neighbors to celebrate. Moreover, for the first time she did not allow Kikich to interfere. In her words, her daughter's hands would be of great use in the future, so it was better not to do these manual labor. His mother went to work alone. Batu was in a bad mood. He returned to his room and covered himself with a blanket to sleep, leaving Kikich alone. However, her feelings were actually very complicated. She really wanted to help her brother. Just like the Han people, the Mongols also had the idea of valuing boys over girls. No matter how good a daughter was, she would eventually have to marry someone. Only when the man in her family had a promising future would he be able to bring real change to the family. The relationship between the two of them had been very good since they were young. As the elder sister, Kikich didn't want to see her younger brother depressed and upset. She would rather not be chosen than to see this scene happen. No, I have to help my brother. A firm voice rang out in his heart. Chichigu said that he had something to do and left the room. In her mind, she thought about what Beta Persei had said to her. If you have any problems, you can come to me. She decided to give it a try. No matter what, he was still in the Yang residence. It shouldn't be a problem for him to help her brother with this small matter. Beta Persei did not expect that while he was still thinking about Kikich in his heart, she would actually come to his door so quickly. He was still on duty by Yang Qindong's side. After reporting what he saw at the publicity office, he became a little absent-minded. With Yang Qindong's observation skills, he naturally noticed this, but he did not ask anything. He believed that if there was really something big, Beta Persei would definitely report to him. It was also at this time that the second guard captain, Dao Xiao, entered the room. Seeing the sixth young master sitting there reading a book, he carefully went to Beta Persei's side. Beta Persei, gee, someone is looking for you outside. It's a girl called Kikich. Chapter 755. Originally, Yang Air still looked listless. Looking at the situation, he wanted to ask who was looking for him, but when he suddenly heard Chichiji's name, he didn't even report to Yang Qindong. Instead, he rushed out of the house and disappeared without a trace. What's going on? Yang Qindong noticed Beta Persei's abnormal behavior. He did not ignore it but asked Dao Xiao, who seemed to know some inside information. Dao Xiao was not gossiping, but he had to answer the sixth young master's question. He immediately told him what happened in the morning at the entrance of the publicity office. He was very objective. He even reported what Beta Persei said to Shui Qing. Yang Qindong was smart. He immediately knew that Beta Persei had fallen in love with the girl called Kikich. Beta Persei was not young anymore, and Yang Qindong never stopped his subordinates from dating and getting married. There was even a period of time when he wanted to find a wife for Beta Persei. He did not expect that the opportunity would come to him. Since it had happened, he could not ignore it. After all, Beta Persei was someone close to him. If something happened, it would be a big deal. Go find Feng Liang. Tell him that I said it. I want to know more about Kikich, her family, and the people around her, Yang Qindong ordered Dao Xiao. Although it was a coincidence and there should not be any problems with Kikich, things were unpredictable. Without investigation, there was no right to speak. Beta Persei did not know that Kikich's matter had attracted the sixth young master's attention. He only knew that the girl in his heart had appeared, and that was enough to make him excited. After running out of the room, Beta Persei quickly calmed down. First, he tidied up his clothes and found that there was nothing wrong. Then he walked out of the Yang Mansion's gate with steady steps. The sixth young master had said that the more important the matter was, the calmer one had to be in order to make the most accurate decision. Yang Air also learned to calm down, but when he went out and saw Kikich standing there with her head lowered, he was discouraged. He realized that his heartbeat was very disappointing. No matter how hard he tried to calm down, he couldn't calm his heart down. Perhaps Beta Persei was worried that the girl already had a husband. It's you, Kikich, right? My name is Beta Persei. No matter what kind of worries he had, Beta Persei decided to get to know her first. If she was not betrothed, then his chance had come. While introducing himself, He also extended an arm that represented friendship. Unfortunately, he did not get a response from Kikich. The other party was not used to this at all. Seeing Second Yang reach out his hand to her as soon as they met, she was shocked. Her whole body involuntarily stepped back, and her eyes revealed fear. She almost shouted, "What do you want to do?" Hee hee. Seeing that his actions were a little frightening, Beta Persei smiled foolishly and retracted his hand. He touched his head and broke the awkwardness by asking, "You must have something to tell me. Speak." Beta Persei extended his hand as soon as they met, which was not considered polite at the time. It made Kikich feel that she had found the wrong person. After all, that action was a little too frivolous. However, Beta Persei expressed his goodwill and asked if she had anything to tell him. This made Kikich hesitate for a while before she bit her lip and made up her mind. "Our family has encountered a little problem and we would like to ask for your help, but I don't know if you can help." Beta Persei was delighted when he heard this. This was a good opportunity to understand Kikich's family. He would know what kind of person she was as soon as he went, so how could he refuse? As for his ability, there should not be many people in the beginning city who would not give him face. Beta Persei was of course full of confidence in the things he was good at. He patted his strong chest and said, "I can still do ordinary things." Beta Persei's appearance seemed to give Kikich confidence. She really had no other choice. It seemed that among the people she knew, only Beta Persei seemed to have some status. "Well, it's about my younger brother. His name is Batu." In the end, Kikich told Beta Persei about the family matters, but it was only limited to her younger brother. She did not tell him about her mother's illness and poor health. It was the first time they met, so it would be rude to tell him everything. Beta Persei listened carefully. At this time he felt that Kikich's voice was so pleasant to the ear. Even though she was a little pouting when she spoke Chinese and was not even fluent, he felt that it was nice to hear. Perhaps this was what it meant by beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Kikich finished speaking very quickly, but when she saw that Beta Persei was still listening carefully, she could not help but ask anxiously, Are you listening?" "Oh, I'm listening." Beta Persei quickly returned to his body and nodded. "The younger brother you mentioned has good physical fitness. He's already an adult, right? But because he's the only son in the family he can't join the army, right?" "Yes, that's it. Do you have any ideas?" After listening, Kikich's hopeful eyes fell on Beta Persei. Beta Persei enjoyed this kind of gaze very much, but he also felt a lot of pressure. This was the time to show his ability. If he did not perform well, he was afraid that there would be no chance for what would happen next. With Beta Persei's identity, if he greeted the conscription office, the problem of Batu joining the army would definitely be solved in the most appropriate way and even the best arrangements would be made. After all, he was one of the people around the sixth young master, so he definitely had some face. However, after following Yang Qindong for a long time, Beta Persei trusted his eyes more than his ears. He decided to take a look at Batu personally to see if he was really as tall and strong as Kikich said. Of course, no one knew if he would take this opportunity to understand Kikich's family situation. "How about this, can I meet your brother? If he's really as good as you said, then I should be able to help." Beta Persei did not immediately make a promise. Instead, he wanted to understand the situation before making a decision. Kikich hesitated. She was not worried about Beta Persei's ability. After all, they were at the entrance of the Yang mansion where he came from. Would the people around the god of war and the messenger of Tingri be bad people? She was only worried about the situation at home. For some reason, she did not want Beta Persei to see the situation at home. "What's wrong? Is there a problem?" Seeing that Kikich did not immediately agree, Beta Persei asked. Logically speaking, since he had agreed to help, the other party should be happy and should immediately lead the way. Could it be that there was something that was hard to say? Or was it that she was already married, and if she brought another man home, others would gossip about her? No problem. Kikich bit her lips again and said. Then, as if she had made some kind of decision, she said, "I'll take you to my house to see my brother." In Kikich's heart, there was nothing more important than her brother's matter. "Okay, wait for me." Beta Persei's heart also settled down. Then he chuckled and turned to the sentinel standing guard at the entrance of the Yang mansion and said, "Go and call out Ba Daojiang's group of brothers. Also, send someone to tell Captain Dao Xiao that I'm going out to handle some personal matters." As one of Yang Qindong's people, Beta Persei had to inform him wherever he went, even if it was not a matter of freedom. Of course, There was no need to report to Yang Qindong and disturb the sixth young master when he went out to handle some personal matters. However, someone in the mansion had to know. The sentinel was also a soldier of the guards. Seeing that it was Beta Persei who had spoken, he immediately agreed and turned to enter the mansion. Not long after, Ba Daojiang led 5 guards out of the mansion and came to Beta Persei's side. Ba Daojiang is ordered to lead the soldiers to report to Beta Persei. As soon as Ba Daojiang appeared, he saluted and said seriously. This was not Beta Persei putting on airs, but doing things according to the rules set by Yang Qindong. The rules required that no one was allowed to act alone when they went out. There had to be at least 4 to 6 people. This was also for their safety. Although the security in the first city seemed to be very good, this was a new city after all. There were many Mongolians in the city. If they were not careful, wouldn't they be asking for trouble if there were any losses? Ba Daojiang had a total of 6 people behind him. Beta Persei turned to look at Kikij and said in a gentle tone, "Okay, you lead the way." Seeing that second Yang was able to bring 6 soldiers with him just by saying a few words, and they were all from the Yang residence, Chichigu thought even more highly of second Yang's ability. He nodded and said, "All right, follow me. However, my home is a bit far from the city. I'm afraid it's a bit far." "It doesn't matter. We don't have any other abilities, but we're not afraid of being tired." Beta Persei patted his chest and said. Kikij did not lie. They walked for nearly 2 hours. He did not know how a girl like her walked from her house to the Yang mansion's entrance alone. When Kikij finally stopped in front of an extremely ordinary-looking door, Beta Persei knew that they had finally arrived. He could not help but curse in his heart, "It seems that I have to ride here next time. The distance is indeed a little too far." In fact, in the first city, people were not allowed to ride horses on the streets without special reasons. Firstly, it was easy to collide with people on horseback. Secondly, horses had horse dung, which would increase the difficulty of cleaning the clean streets in the city. But riding a bicycle was different. It was clean and fast. Of course, other than Beta Persei and the others, it would not be so easy for ordinary people to get a bicycle. When they finally arrived at the door of Kikij's house, Beta Persei's expression became much more solemn. He even tried to squeeze out more smiles on his face. He wanted to leave a good first impression. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.